This is Atomic Shinobi and today I am going to narrate what if Naruto was a billionaire ninja. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Both on the front lines and behind a desk, Sarutobi had fought numerous battles. He has outwitted both ninja and council members and defeated numerous opponents. However, he never anticipated this in all his years. The old Hokage sat in his office, examining the boy in front of him. Still in his teens, he was young. In addition to his blonde, spiked hair, he had 3 scars on his cheeks that resembled whiskers. It was Naruto Uzumaki, who had left the ninja academy at the age of 12 and moved back to the village. "Hello again, old man," he said nonchalantly as he smirked and leaned back in the chair. 3 years had gone by since the Hokage had been made to watch the young boy storm out of the village in a filthy orange jumpsuit, and he was at a loss for words. However, now he sat across from him, wearing a black business suit with a black tie and a red undershirt, and he had a pair of thin reflective sunglasses on his head. Unsure of what to say, he began, "Naruto, you look well." "I wish I could say the same to you, old man, you look, well, older," the blonde grinned. For the first time in what seemed like years, he smiled broadly. "It's great to see you again too," he said, laughing. "Looks like you've been pretty well off since you left." Nodded. "I'm very well off. You're looking at the owner of nearly a half-dozen first-class restaurants and quite a few other lower-class ones. I'm sure you've heard of the Black Rose Corporation that sprung up a year ago." With a startled blink, Sarutobi said, "That was you?" The Black Rose Company gained notoriety for establishing a number of upscale eateries as well as more affordable ones for the less fortunate. The more upscale ones were always called the Black Rose, but it was difficult to identify the others, which ranged from fast food joints to basic food stands. Naruto grinned and nodded. "I've always had a love for cooking, traveled around for a while, learning to cook everything I could. Turns out that people loved my food. I started out working in a small family-run business and quickly turned the place into one of the most popular in the city. With that, it was easy to buy out any run-down or bankrupt restaurants and turn them around. But I'm not here to rub my success in your face or anything. If I gave you that impression, I'm here on business." "Go on." Naruto got up and said, "There are certain properties that I want to buy. I want full ownership of the land and came to you because I trust you to do so. I don't want your little council to try and worm their way into my business to line their pockets. I've shut down 2 of my places and put many people out of work because of councils trying to take money out of my business, saying that it was for unforeseen taxes." His tone was so dripping with disgust that Sarutobi could almost hear it. "The first area is within the walls, in Sector 5. It's a forest right now, but I'm planning on opening a nice place that connects to nature. The second is the shop near the Hokage monument, the one that fell into debt. I want to open a aquatic restaurant there." "Well, Naruto-kun, I do believe that I can do that for you. Both areas are up for sale and I have the deeds right," the elderly man said, nodding as he flipped through some papers. He then opened his drawer, took out a large folder, and took out 2 sheets. "Here." Naruto observed him completing several forms and signing them as instructed. "Now will that be cash or check?" "Check," Naruto said, taking out a black checkbook and writing the appropriate amount on it while signing it. "Well, Naruto-kun, you are now the proud owner of both places," Sarutobi said, shaking the boy's hand as he accepted the offered paper and put it away in his desk. "I'll have the deed and have a copy of everything sent to you as soon as possible." "Thank you, old man, it was nice doing business with you," Naruto said with a nod. The fact that Naruto was prepared to depart, having completed his business and not wanting to speak after being gone for so long, slightly offended Sarutobi. However, he was aware that Naruto had every right to desire to be separated from him because he had done little to assist him during his early years. He recalled the day he departed, feeling deceived by everyone around him and furious at being duped by Mizuki. Naruto declared that he was leaving the academy when the Anbu brought him in, and then he departed, neither more nor less. As the blonde clutched the door handle, he called abruptly, "Naruto-kun, I apologize for everything. I should have done more to assist you when you were younger." "Don't worry, old man. Things like that don't matter to me anymore," Naruto said without uttering a word. For what seemed like the first time in ages, Sarutobi smiled slightly as he watched Naruto go. A rather rough-looking man in a black suit bowed to Naruto as he left the tower. "Sir," Naruto asked him to follow him as he passed, "I've acquired the properties. Inform Tazuna-san that I have a need for his skill. He will be paid the usual rate and tell him that if he can hurry up and finish before deadline, I'll give him a bonus." "Of course, Lord Chairman." In order to avoid being overheard by the many people who were already staring at them, Naruto paused and turned to face the man. "Also, send a message to the heads to prepare for a meeting. I'll inform them of the date and time a few days before." Hi, he remained motionless for a moment, and Naruto became irritated. Well, you're dismissed, he said. Oh. Of course, Lord Chairman. With a frustrated sigh, Naruto shook his head and began to move backward. After a minute, he became aware of the looks he received from others and even overheard some of the older women whispering to each other that he appeared to be a good, respectable young man. One even expressed her wish that her granddaughter would try dating someone like him rather than the young thugs she usually dated. Lord Chairman. With a sigh, Naruto turned to face an elderly man who was running toward him, huffing as if he had just finished a marathon. The blonde rolled his eyes and deadpanned, "Hello, Nishki." Wearing a brown business suit and a pair of slim box-frame glasses over his eyes, Nishki was a young, well-groomed man in his mid-20s. He is a math whiz and exceptionally intelligent for his age, but the one issue was. "Don't, hello Nishki, me," he growled. "I was told to watch over you, chairman or not. The board members insist that I make sure nothing happens to you. You're too important to the company to lose." After snorting, Naruto asked, "How funny, they send an accountant to watch my back. What you gonna do when someone tried to mug us?" With his polished brown shoe kicking at the dirt, Nishki lost all of his steam and said, "Well sir, we all know the rumors about you. I figured that they only sent me to try and keep you out of trouble." After a minute of staring at the man, Naruto snorted and turned away. "Pussy," he said. Nishki walked slowly after his boss, his head lowered in shame. He worked as one of the many accountants for the Black Rose Company and did not personally know the chairman, but he had heard tales and rumors about the younger man ever since he was hired. "Naruto, Nishki, hurry the hell up," shaking his head, the dark-haired man realized Naruto was far ahead of him. "Sorry sir," Naruto was shaking his head. "It's bad enough that I have to have a baby. Sitter Nishki, don't make me wait on you while you daydream." "Yes sir, Nishki," Naruto began without glancing at him. "I'm easy to get along with for the most part. I really don't know much about you besides the fact that you're smart and..." Naruto turned abruptly into an alley, then stopped and huffed in frustration. "Thank you sir," Nishki interrupted, beaming at the compliment. The brunette sighed and grinned. "And you really don't know me, but I'm starting to sense that you're a kiss-ass and a bit of a bitch, so why don't you go to the dry cleaners and pick up the suit I dropped off this morning?" "But sir, I was told to." The man's cheek was pressed against his side as Naruto turned and seized him, his arm around his neck. "As I was saying," he growled, "go pick up my suit, before I remove your thumb with a meat cleaver. Do not forget Nishki. I am the chairman of the Kuwabara clan, and my word is law." Naruto leaned closer to the man's head and muttered, "The board may have ordered you to try and keep me out of trouble, and I won't stop you, but you will do as I say or else." Nishki gave a frantic nod, and Naruto, frowning, released him. "Forgive me Lord Chairman," Nishki said, lowering himself to his knees and bowing until his forehead almost touched the stone walkway. "Get up and go get my suit from the cleaners," he said sternly, "take it to my hotel room and leave it there." "Yes Lord Chairman." Nishki had learned his lesson in dealing with the chairman, and he remained that way until he was no longer able to hear the footsteps. His anger was almost godlike, but there was a reason no one opposed him. Being in his good graces had many benefits. After straightening his coat once more, Naruto left the alleyway and headed toward the red light district, which is his home away from home. Jiraiya flew over the village, jumping from building to building and looking down at the roads. He had just heard from his sensei that Minato's child, Naruto, was coming to visit him. Hearing that Naruto had abandoned his ninja career and left the village years prior had disappointed him. He had been waiting until that day to return because he had promised Minato and Kushina that he would train the boy when he turned into a genin. Although he would have arrived sooner, he was unable to fulfill his responsibility as the boy's true godfather because he was too busy managing a spy network. However, Sarutobi told him that Naruto had decided to leave the village after being duped and betrayed by his Chunin teacher when he returned, eager to meet the blonde. The man would have been killed by the Toad Sage if it weren't for Ibiki taking care of him beforehand. However, he now had the opportunity to meet Naruto and keep his word after learning that he was in the village. Years ago, he would have done it, but Naruto just disappeared. Let's see, black suit, blonde hair. As he scanned the roads, his long white ponytail whipping around behind him, he told himself, bright hair, black suit. Upon landing on a rooftop, he observed a sizable crowd encircled by a circle, with two men assaulting another man. A small 3-man Anbu unit stood across from him, observing the battle and preparing to break it up if it got lethal. Because ninjas have an advantage and could potentially kill civilians or destroy buildings, Anbu was instructed to only intervene in a fight between ninjas and civilians. If both fighters were civil, they would typically wait for the slower police to stop them before intervening if one of them pulled a knife or something. What's going on here? The toad summoner asked, leaping over. Jiraiya. Sama, we were patrolling the area when two civilians accused another of cheating in the small gambling house. They threatened to attack, but the other said that they would ruin the place, so he took them out into the streets. Following normal procedure, we watched to assure that neither tries to kill the other, the squad leader stated to him. He swore as he turned to see the fighters up close and witnessed the two civilians removing pocket knives from a blonde man dressed in black trousers and dark red shit. The pervert and the Anbu began to break up the altercation, but the blonde knocked them both unconscious as soon as they drew their knives, punching one in the nose and kicking the other in the face. 10 minutes prior to Naruto smirked as he entered the tiny gambling establishment. Gambling was one of his favorite activities. Especially with his good fortune, he didn't always win, but it wouldn't be enjoyable if he did. He soon secured a seat at an oicho kabu table, perched on a plush pillow as the dealer dealt cards. Played in the past, the game had more traditional rules and was older than other games like baccarat and blackjack. The objective was to use just 3 cards to get to a total where the last digit was closest to 9. The two other players at the table were irritated by his frequent victories and continued to drink sake. At last, they became enraged as he smirked while examining his cards. The first one jumped up and yelled, "You cheater, there's no way you can keep winning." The man's friend continued, "Yeah, ever since you started playing you kept winning." "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about," Naruto said, glancing up at the two standing while still seated on the pillow. "Don't give me that shit, admit it," swore the first. "Admit what? You bitch, you know what I'm talking about, admit that you were cheating or I'll kick your ass," he said, kicking the table over and knocking the cards and sake bottles to the ground. "I did not cheat. Now, let's take this outside. I wouldn't want to ruin this establishment's furniture more than you already have," Naruto said, sighing and getting to his feet after unbuttoning his coat. Naruto shrugged off his jacket and placed it over the handrail just outside the door, and the two rushed outside after him. "Now," he said, rolling his shoulder and popping his neck, "let's hurry this up, I have things to do. You'll be eating through a straw when I'm through with you." Naruto grabbed the man's head, tripped him to the ground, and leaned aside to give him a hard stomach knee. The blonde whirled around and elbowed the other man in the face when he attempted to strike him from behind. As he looked at his watch, Naruto exclaimed, 6 seconds. That's a new personal best." Punk number 1 pushed himself off the ground and yelled, "Fucker, I'll kill you." He lunged at him, but Naruto ducked under the blade. After a brief roundhouse kick, the knife stabbed him in the dirt a short distance away, leaving him unconscious. Naruto turned around and nailed him in the nose after the second punk attempted to stab him as well. The audience applauded the blonde for the valiant battle and laughed, but they soon dispersed when Anbu appeared to arrest the two men for attempted murder. "Nice of you to show up," Naruto thought. "Why is it that police or any law enforcement for that matter are always late?" Ignoring him, the Anbu departed to imprison the two men. "Naruto?" "Yay," said the blonde, turning around as his name was called. "Naruto Uzumaki?" Jiraiya asked the blonde as she approached. "That's my name," the homosexual chuckled. "I'm Jiraiya, I've been looking for you for a while. I was a friend of your parents." "Well Jiraiya, I wasn't hiding of anything, so you must not have been looking too hard," Naruto said dismissively as he walked over and picked up his suit coat before putting it on. He also whipped imaginary dust from the sleeves. "Here, this is for any damages," he said to the manager who approached after the blonde returned to the gambling establishment and took a small bundle of cash from the inside of his coat. Jiraiya watched this with interest as she followed him inside. "Well ain't that a bitch," Naruto thought as he flipped the table and discovered his cards, which were still face down and together. 8, 9, and 3. "Ya, ku, za," he said. It had been a week since Naruto had returned to his hometown. The location in Sector 5 was progressing well. 3 days later, early in the morning, Waves Tazuna rallied his builders and their caravan of workers, who were already pounding on the village gates. Having been business partners with Tazuna for some time, he made an investment in the town after Goto depleted almost all of their funds. They reached a compromise because Tazuna wouldn't take a handout, even though it was more of a charity endeavor. They would build him things at a later date at a reduced cost, but they would only reimburse a portion of it. Tazuna was able to turn his small group of builders into a legitimate business and grow it by giving them all the business and hiring them for the majority of the bigger projects. Tazuna personally oversaw the majority of the sites, assigning other supervisors to handle other tasks. Once the job was finished, they, like Naruto and Tazuna, had a custom of celebrating by having Naruto prepare a big meal for the employees for free as a thank you and serve some of the best sake money could buy. Knowing that jobs for him typically resulted in a large bonus and a fancy meal, Tazuna had once told him that he had a few of his employees start a fight over who got to go. The builders were currently divided into two groups, with the smaller group repairing the building beneath the Hokage monument and the larger group working on the foundation in Sector 5. A tea house, well liked by the affluent but obstinate clans, was to be built beneath the monument. As the old man shouted instructions to the men, he stood in the construction site, studying the plans. Wearing a bright yellow hard hat on his head and a light gray suit with a red shirt underneath, he watched as the men tore up the flooring to redo it. The elderly man turned back to face the younger boy and said, "So Naruto-san, the wiring was in near perfect condition. My men are now working on the floors and will start on the walls soon." Nodding and crossing his arms, Naruto said, "Good, you're ahead of schedule. You can move your men to the other side once everything is up to date and certain places have been modified. My men can take care of setting up and getting this place off the ground." Naruto paused and took a brown envelope out of his coat pocket. "Here's a little bonus, for your guys. Some of it goes towards the hotels you're staying in, but other than that, split it up into parts." Accepting it, Tazuna opened it to peek inside. He grinned and shoved the heavy pile of bills into his pocket, saying, "Thanks, I'll give them their cuts later. I'll be dropping by later to check on the progress. See you later, Tazuna-san," Naruto said, nodding and pivoted on his heel. When the blonde took off his hard hat and walked off the construction site, Tazuna waved at him. "Sir." After leaving Nishki at the inn early in the morning to recuperate from a severe hangover from the previous evening, Naruto turned to face the person approaching him and sighed, saying, "Nishki, what a surprise." Naruto nodded while glancing at his watch. 2:43. 6 hours since I left the inn, that's a new record for you, he said. He tried to yell, "I should have known that you planned this," but Nishki glared at him, causing him to wince and grab his hair. Naruto laughed. "For a desk jockey, you handled yourself very well. Drinking all that sake last night and still getting up the next day, I must say, I'm proud. Most people would be too hungover to move until the next day." "I can understand why, sir. How much did I drink?" murmured Nishki, massaging his temples. "Enough to knock out a horse. How you're up and about I'll never know," the blonde chuckled. Nishki moaned when he heard the hammering noises. When the blonde took him out to a club for a drink, he had assumed that she was beginning to like him. He had been suspicious at first, but after drinking 3 drinks, he began to lose his keys. He didn't even remember going to sleep, so he was shocked to wake up that morning with a debilitating hangover. He became aware of his boss's actions later that day, and he became so inebriated that he was unable to follow him the following day. Shaking his head, he turned to see that the blonde chairman had abandoned him in the middle of the road once more. He jogged after him, cursed, and went back to work trying to keep him out of trouble. After a minute, Nishki said, "Sir, you know that the village will be hosting a festival soon, right?" Nodded. "Yeah, something about how long it's been since the village was founded," he replied dismissively, "but the important thing is the business opportunities that it presents. Desperate shopkeepers want loans to stock up and hopefully make a huge profit from the tourists. Gamblers from all over come and try to make some extra cash in back alley gambling. Just makes my black heart flutter at the possibilities." "I get it, you came here because of the festival," Nishki oohed. "Bingo, but if you're here during the festival, won't you run into her?" The thought made Naruto frown. "Didn't think of that. Fuck, the last thing I need is that gold. Digging slut chasing me around." He stopped in the middle of the road, his eyes wide. "Screw it, I'll deal with that bitch when it comes up." Nishki thought, what a great way to start an afternoon, now he's pissed off. As he considered having to cope with, Naruto scowled to himself. Her at all, but he would handle it when it arose, as he had stated. Someone called out, "Hey Gaki," from the side. A pervert was approaching from the bushes that were planted next to the women's hot springs fence when Naruto glanced over with a twitching eye. To get everyone's attention, Naruto yelled, "Jiraiya, why am I not surprised to see you around these parts? Peeking into the hot springs again, I see." The glares from those who heard caused the white-haired man to begin perspiring. He said, Now Naruto, you shouldn't spread rumors like that, in an attempt to keep from getting kicked in the ass." The glares soon subsided, and the women went about their business without stopping to glare at the elderly pervert. "Rumors are only rumors as long as no one knows they're true. I happen to know that they are a fact. Now care to tell me what you want?" Naruto said, glancing at him through his sunglasses. "Well, I wanted to know if you wanted me to train you. You sorta blew me off last time," the perverted man complained, crossing his arms. Naruto cocked his head sideways with Fr. "I happen to remember you stopping to gaze at the girls swimming under the waterfall. I simply walked away to give you your privacy while you played with yourself like the sad perverse old man you are." Sputtering, Jiraiya said, What? I did not. Naruto raised his eyebrows. Nishki, go back to the inn and get some rest. You look like you need it. I'll be here with this pervert, so run along. Half irritated and half relieved that he could finally take care of his headache, the man sighed as he made shooing motions with his hand. Naruto followed Jiraiya to the nearest training area. Okay kid, let's start with some basic sparring. Don't worry, I'll go easy on you. They positioned themselves and bided their time until one moved. Naruto observed the older man's movements. His tense legs were poised to move if necessary. With their hands closed but not clenched, they were prepared to catch kicks or slap punches away. He thought sparring was a good idea, but he didn't see the man stretch before preparing, so his tense legs would eventually cramp. After a minute, Jiraiya flinched as he had expected and relaxed his muscles, allowing him to leap forward and thrust his leg out. Jiraiya staggered back as it struck with a thump, and Naruto grinned at him. Jiraiya looked up to see a smirking blonde after blinking and touching the spot on his chest where Naruto's dress shoe had attached. There's a difference between going easy and letting someone win, he said glumly. Are you even trying? Naruto was able to get under the Sanin's protection after he swore after missing the blonde by a hair. The man was knocked off his feet and thrown against a tree by Naruto, who pushed forward and jammed his shoulder into his stomach. He was warned by a puff of smoke that the man had changed just before he struck the tree trunk. Naruto pushed himself back and dropped the log, but he turned around in time to be hit in the jaw, which made him stagger back. Naruto staggered and shook his head, and Jiraiya grinned. A busted lip and bloody teeth were revealed when the blonde smirked back at him and spat out some blood. He said, "That was a good one," as the gash on his lip began to heal in front of the man's eyes. "I think it's time to take it up a notch," he said. Jiraiya prepared himself while Naruto produced a dagger akin to those carried by samurai by reaching under his jacket. Whether a civilian or not, Naruto was giving the pervert a hard time, and he cursed as he avoided slice after slice. Distracted, he leaned back to avoid losing his neck and fell on his back, feeling the blonde kick his knee. "Damn it kid, that hurt." Jiraiya sat up, rubbed his knee, and hissed. "It's a spar. Get over it and thank Kami you're still breathing," Naruto said, snorting and calming down. "True, but you made a huge mistake. Jiraiya was only a shadow clone, as evidenced by the way he vanished in a puff of smoke. The real one came up behind the blonde, took his knife, and then put it to his throat. Never relax your guard until you're sure it's over." While remaining motionless, Naruto hummed. Unlike Jiraiya, he was aware of how sharp his own blade was. One slip would open his throat like an extra mouth. Jiraiya was unaware, however, that Naruto had previously engaged in combat with ninjas and detested losing. Jiraiya was shocked when he felt something slam into his ankle because he was certain he had won and had made the same error as Naruto. Using the heel of his shoe, Naruto kicked the man in the ankle. With one hand, he grabbed the knife at his throat by its blade. With the other hand, he reached over his shoulder and grabbed Jiraiya's shirt front. With all of his strength, he threw him. Naruto swiftly landed and sprang to his feet, reaching with both hands under his jacket once more to extract his last two blades. If anyone had seen it, they would have mistaken it for a film. Both of them stopped and stared into each other's eyes. Once more, Jiraiya held the blade an inch from Naruto's neck, and Naruto held two meat cleavers as close to Jiraiya's as the blade was to him. Naruto, wearing sunglasses, told him calmly, "You're pretty quick for an old guy." Jiraiya answered, "And you're pretty good for a teenage civilian." Jiraiya felt something warm strike his foot as they retreated. He noticed blood on the ground and noticed that blood was dripping from Naruto's meat cleaver handle when he looked up. The blonde glanced at his palm and tucked his two blades under his coat. When he threw him over his shoulder, Jiraiya managed to hold onto the knife, and when the blade was removed from his grasp, it cut his hand quite badly. The pervert said, "You're bleeding," as he observed the blood seeping from his hand. "I'm fine, but I want my knife back," said Naruto, clenching his hand and waving it away. "Like you need it. You got two meat cleavers under that jacket," Jiraiya said, returning the knife. "For good reason too," retorted Naruto. "Like what?" Naruto gave him a direct look and said, "Protection." Jiraiya dropped the subject when he showed no interest in discussing it further, saying, "Well, I can see that you can handle yourself, but what about any ninja training?" "Besides what I got in the academy, not much," Naruto said, shrugging after putting his knife away. "I taught myself how to increase my speed and power by channeling chakra certain ways, but besides that, nothing." After they spent some time practicing chakra control, Naruto's regard for the man grew a little bit. It wasn't much, but he no longer saw him as a perverted waste of space, only an old man with a perverse side. "Maybe I was wrong about you, old man. Come and find me if you ever need something," Naruto said, straightening his sunglasses. assuming the elderly ninja would prove to be a useful ally in the future. He waved at him briefly before turning to leave. Gazing at the bloodstains on his suit, Naruto absently cursed himself as he made his way back to the village and the hotel. It was his own damn fault for wearing a light gray suit, so he couldn't hold anyone else accountable. Furthermore, it was his best casual suit. Only a few tailored suits were superior. Sighing to himself, he asked himself, could this day end any sooner? A couple of hours later, Naruto emerged from his sweet shower at around 8 o'clock, wearing only a pair of boxer briefs and a towel over his head. The blonde, who was idly drying his hair, turned to the dresser and moaned when he saw a pile of letters with the Black Rose Company seal on them. As he glanced through them, he muttered, "Can't you people do something without my approval for once?" They knew better than to mess with his company, but that didn't mean they had to ask for permission to remodel a space or replace broken items. With a sigh, he pushed them away, tossed the towel on the floor, and reclined on his bed. The heads of each branch were coming as well because he wanted to hold the clan meeting during the week. Long celebration and more of his guys were coming to Konoha to assist with the festival. These meetings were risky because rivals wanted to murder members of the group and the police were looking into some of them. This kind of event was bound to attract attention, but he wasn't concerned because he had taken such care to ensure that no one knew he was the clan's leader, just that he was a sincere, diligent businessman who strived to create some of the greatest restaurants in the world. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on his door. "Room service," a woman called from the other side, and he grinned. He stood up and opened the door to find a gorgeous redhead in a kimono leaning against his doorframe. "I don't remember ordering anything to eat," he said, smiling at her and drawing her close to him. The girl rubbed the front of his panties and giggled, "Oh Lord Chairman, aren't you just a little hungry?" "Oh, I'm sure you can help me work up an appetite," Naruto said, grabbing her ass. After dragging her into his room, he slammed the door. The girl was screaming, so it was fortunate that he had rented out the only penthouse suite on the top floor. A tiny store in the Konoha slums reverberated with the sound of glass breaking and sobbing. "I thought I told you, old man, if you don't pay the protection money you owe us, we might not be able to save it from some unfortunate accident." The elderly man watched in horror as three young men broke everything in his small convenience store by taking bats to everything in his shop. As they destroyed everything they could, including the coolers, snack racks, and even the register, and stole their money, his daughter fled in terror behind him. The shop door opened, and as it did so, the small bell above it rang frantically. A dark-haired man with a cigarette in his mouth, a scraggly beard, and an eye patch over his right eye stood in the door. He asked idly, blowing smoke out of his nose, "Oi, what do we have here? A bunch of street thugs trying to run a protection racket. Don't you kids know better than to try and play with the big boys?" he said. The thugs glared at him. Looking like a freak, one of them said sarcastically, "Who do you think you talking to?" The man glanced down at his attire, which included a snakeskin suit coat over his bare chest, black pants, and matching dress shoes. "Hey man, these are worth more than you," he said slowly, laughing a little. "But that's not really saying anything, because a pile of shit is worth more than you." One of the young men was furious and attempted to strike the older man's head with his bat. His eyes suddenly lost their lazy gleam and took on a crazy gleam. He dodged the blow and delivered a forceful blow to his abdomen, causing him to lose consciousness and drop the bat. "Next," said the slack man, grinning languidly at the other three as he picked it up and placed it over his shoulder. He looked at the elderly man and said, "I'm sorry about your place, sir," after the lazy men quickly dispatched the three young thugs and finished his smoke. "Kids these days, no respect," he sighed. The elderly man raised his head in gratitude. "Thank you, sir, thank you. These thugs have been demanding protection money from us. We've barely had enough to support ourselves." He wept. "The police units barely come through here, so this neighborhood is covered in gangs. My name is Hachi, and this is my daughter Fumichi." The man said, "Guro Majima," nodding. "Well, Mr. Majima, I thank you, but once the other gangs hear about this, we'll be overrun by other punks." Guro nodded his head. "No, you won't. From now on, you are under the protection of the Majima family. You're just another thug." The elderly man began, but Guro interrupted him as his eyes hardened. He demonstrated this by kicking the person closest to him while grinning cruelly, saying, "No, not a thug. I am Guro, the mad dog. Majima, patriarch of the Majima clan, much better than a lowly street rat like these punks." The suites were more like tiny homes, with a good-sized living room, kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom. Nishki knocked on the door to his boss's room. An irritated voice called out, "What is it?" He called through the door, "Sir, Mr. Majima has arrived in the village." The man heard two people getting dressed as he stood there for a minute with his ear to the door. A redhead shoved him aside and proceeded down the hallway in the direction of the elevator as the door abruptly opened, causing him to stagger back. Leaning in the doorway, Naruto observed Nishki staring dumbly at the girl's swaying hips. The man blushed and turned away from the girl as he asked, "Enjoying the view?" The girl turned and went into the elevator. "Yes," Nishki said, turning back to face his boss, who was wearing only pants. "Good, because if you said no I'd have to think you were a little gay," Naruto said, chuckling slightly. "No straight man can resist an ass like that," he joked. With his glasses a little hazy, the other man nodded and said, "I agree." The man sputtered denials as Naruto shook his head and said, "But whatever, let me get dressed so we can start the day. Gotta find Guro before he gets locked up for starting a fight." Again. "Nishki, if you blush because of that you really need to lose your virginity," he said, yawning as he walked back into his room. Guro was a wonderful and devoted friend, but he deservedly earned the moniker Mad Dog. He was cool and undemanding one moment, and ruthless and irascible the next. The only issue with hanging around with him, though, was that he was proud to show off his Yakuza membership, and being around him made people wonder if you were also a member. At least he has enough common sense to refrain from discussing the clan in public. He proudly boasted about the greatness of the Majima family and frequently displayed his demon tattoo during fights. Naruto walked over to the closet where he had all of his belongings hung up after putting on and tucking in his white long-sleeve shirt. There were several suitcases and some of his suits, which were protected by thick plastic. He took out a black vest with a small silver pocket watch that was tucked into a small pocket on the front and had a chain attached to one of the buttons after unzipping one of the plastic covers. In the living room, Nishki called, "Lord Chairman, have you checked your mail this week?" "Sure did." Naruto called back without a trace of dishonesty after pausing to observe the stack of unopened letters on the floor that had been thrown aside the previous evening. Looking around, Naruto discovered his butterfly knife from the previous evening hidden beneath his shirt. He couldn't bring his usual belongings with him because he wasn't going to wear his coat today. He put on a pair of black boots with gleaming silver plates over the toes to finish the ensemble. He was tempted to leave Nishki waiting in the room and climb out the window, but he wasn't up for that shit again, and descending 5 or 6 stories wasn't the most fun thing he had ever done. "All right, Nishki, let's go." The blonde and his devoted dog strolled down the hallway toward the elevator, assistant trailing him. As the elevator dinged and opened, Nishki began, "Okay sir, I've put together everything you need to do today and wrote it on this list." Naruto sighed as he entered and pressed the button to descend to the bottom floor. "You have an appointment with the Hokage in an hour to finalize some paperwork. You also have a few meetings with people who want a loan and you need to okay a few shipments from Wave as well as a large shipment of tea leaves from Tea Country." "Tell me again why I have to give my okay to ship crates of tea and fish?" asked Naruto, frowning. "Because sir, you run things with your restaurants personally, tea shops and houses fall under that category," Nishiki replied without pausing. "You also need to meet with Mr. Majima sometime today, hopefully without having to bail him out of a Konoha jail." In a warning tone, Naruto glared out the corner of his eye and said, "You're starting to overstep your bounds, Nishki. Guro outranks you and he can hurt you for badmouthing him." "Forgive me Lord Chairman." The doors slid open and the elevator dinged. Naruto emerged and assaulted the individual. "I let you get away with a lot of things, Nishki, but you will respect the others that outrank you. I let you yell at me for tricking you, mostly because I find it entertaining, but you will give him the respect he deserves. And for your information, he took the fall for me so that I wouldn't be investigated." Naruto reached in and pushed the button to send the elevator back up to the top floor. "Think about things before you say them." Just as the elevator closed and he was lifted back up, Nishki looked down in shame after receiving a childlike reprimand. The majority were degenerate gamblers who were so indebted that Naruto would literally demand an arm and leg if they owed him money. Naruto really didn't feel like dealing with people who needed loans. In order to free up his day before meeting with the Hokage, Naruto had one of his men notify the shipping company to proceed with shipping his belongings, and another took care of the loan business. Most places discouraged loan sharking because it not only made it difficult for borrowers but also hurt banks by causing them to lose business. If a shark is caught, they may face severe penalties in some places, such as jail time, hefty fines, and occasionally having their belongings seized and put up for auction. If they had anything there, that is. After climbing into the tower and heading up to the Hokage's office, Naruto was thrown to the ground as he turned a corner. A few folders and scrolls flew down the hall with papers. A young woman swore and hurried to retrieve them, claiming that if she made a mistake on her paperwork, her CO would have her head. Once more. He smiled and said, "I think you dropped this when you bumped into me." as the blonde stood up and began assisting her in picking up some of the files. "Oh, sorry about that," the girl muttered as she took the little stack, blushing as she looked up at him. "I've been working all night and I'm pretty tired." "It's all right," he said, his eyes narrowed as he studied the top file. She grinned and nodded to him before jogging away. "Thanks again for the help," she said. Naruto scowled as he saw her turn the corner. When he saw the label for the top files, he was not pleased at all. He believed that Konoha had begun looking into some of his companies. Although they weren't aware that it belonged to him, they were aware of some of the clan's activities, and based on the brief note, he deduced that it was a small-scale drug ring that primarily dealt in level 1 drugs like marijuana. The crew operating it came in second. The majority worked for a single low-level clan soldier and weren't even members of the clan. He had no use for them if they were caught because it indicated that they were careless. The soldier would be marked for death and any clan support would be withdrawn if they were discovered. Hokage. Sama, I believe that these drug dealers are involved in something other than just selling drugs on the streets, a senior investigator told him. They're way too organized to be a normal gang and we still don't know how they're getting it in town. The only way we find out is after it's been sold on the streets. I see, this is troubling indeed, said Sarutobi, nodding. I think this is the work of a Yakuza clan Hokage. Sama, no gang has ever been able to keep in the dark for so long without being caught long before now. The individual added, I would like to request that an Anbu infiltrate this and work undercover. One of your Anbu would have a way better chance than one of us, they seem to smell our training. Hokage. Sama, your afternoon appointment is here, he said, interrupting them with a beep from the intercom on his desk. Yes, I'll be right with him, Sarutobi said, nodding to himself, and then he pressed the button. I'll have one of my Anbu assigned to look into this. Now please excuse me, I have an important meeting, he said. Yes, Hokage. Sama, thank you, said the investigator, nodding and bowing. After a minute, someone knocked on the door and said, Come on in Naruto-kun. Good afternoon, old man, the blonde said with a smile as he entered and closed the door. Hello to you to Naruto-kun. How may I help you? The Hokage said with a sigh and a slight smile in his head. The blonde said, Ah yes, right to business, as she approached and sat down in the chair across from the Hokage. I wish to forego the usual channels and personally put in a request for some work to be done by your ninja, she said. After examining him, Sarutobi said, I suppose I could assist you, Naruto-kun. Normally, my assistants would take care of these tasks for me, but I can do this whenever I feel like it, as he scratched his beard. What kind of work needs to be done? Well, I need one shipment of furniture brought from a town on the border of fire and wind, another brought from a town on the border of grass and fire. It's simple really, but I need them here and a group of ninja are faster. Besides, there's always the off chance of thieves trying to steal things. Given the lack of real danger, they could be classified as D rank, the Hokage thought as he took blank mission scrolls from his desk and nodded. Yes, well, I also need to pick up a large shipment of live fish from Wave as well as a bunch of extremely fragile equipment and special made glass. It'll take around 4 ox-drawn carts to transport and I'll pay extra to make sure that none of it is missing, broken, or in the case of my fish, dead. As he was speaking, Sarutobi was recording the conditions and other details in writing. His years of enduring paperwork had equipped him with the requisite expertise. And lastly, I need a team to retrieve a couple crates from Wave when they arrive. And what might these crates contain? The Hokage asked, glancing at him. Naruto laughed. Officially, just a bunch of tablecloths and other things for my restaurant. Raising an eyebrow, Sarutobi said, and unofficially, as if he were nearly terrified to hear it. It's tea leaves, Naruto said as he leaned forward and looked around. He didn't know why he thought he would hear that it was some ancient, precious piece of history or a crate of gold, but the Hokage's perspiration stopped. Tea? He asked, his tone unbelieving. Nodded. Yes, but not just any kind of leaf, it's the kind we use to brew our special tea. While the leaf itself is bought by a lot of clans, most notably your very own Hyuga clan, they don't know what the secret ingredients are to make it as good as we do. That is why, I will personally be going along to oversee this. As well as the trip to pick up the fish. I understand, the Hokage said, nodding. Will these two occur simultaneously? Naruto nodded. No, it'll be at least a week apart. The tea isn't scheduled to arrive until the end of next week. Hokage. Sama, the council elders are here to see you. They say it's urgent. The intercom beeped once more. Naruto got up and said, Well, I'll be on my way. Feel free to stop by for a meal once my place is up and running. Oh, and Hokage. Sama, he said, if your Anbu continued to shadow me around, You will find that I have friends in high places that could make your time in office very difficult. I do not appreciate being spied on, he said, pausing as he approached the door. Of course Naruto-kun, Sarutobi said, blushing and nodding while laughing nervously. He had them follow him around in case the villagers tried anything, but it wasn't really to spy on him. Good, now have a wonderful day, old man, Naruto said, nodding. Naruto ordered one from a small stand selling dango as he left the tower and headed out onto the street. If it isn't Ruto-chan, while paying the vendor, Naruto paused his task and laughed, saying, I recognize that laid-back tone anywhere, without ever looking at the man behind him. Actually, I'm glad you're here, saves me the trouble of finding you myself, he said. Always ready to help make your life easier, Ruto-chan, Guro said dramatically as he approached and bought himself a stick. He also made a small bow. Shaking his head, Naruto muttered, come on, gesturing for him to follow. Let's walk, he said. I see Nishki is missing, Guro said, laughing. I told the others that you'd lose him and sending him would be a waste of time. Guro then walked up beside the blonde and told the man to keep the change. I really don't care, he knows where the line is and the punishment to crossing them too many times. He had a little trouble at first, but I taught him just who the head of the clan is, Naruto said, swallowing one of the sweet dumplings on the stick and shrugging. He's lucky one of the others saw something in him because I would have never let him into my family, Guro said, picking his teeth with the stick after consuming them all at once. Nishki's always been a little bitch, Guro said. Lay off him, Guro. While I agree that he is a bit of a bitch and has the sense of humor of a shoe, he means well enough. He only wants to do a good job. He's still a pussy though, Guro muttered, ain't that the truth? They passed by kids playing as their moms sat on benches and talked among themselves as they made their way into one of the many parks. After a minute, Guro asked, so what's up Ruto-chan? Why choose Konoha for the meeting? As you should remember, me and Konoha have a history. Guro laughed. Yeah, hundreds of people trying to murder you on your birthday, I'd call that history. He ignored it, yes. Well, as such, besides opening my new restaurants, there is a festival coming up. A lot of you are already in a crime database, so instead of meeting in some desolate cave, we will use the influx of travelers to meet here, under the guise of wanting to enjoy the festival. Guro whispered to himself, security will be strained more than usual. Nodded. Yes, and any police and ninja will most likely be too busy keeping watch over the streets than trying to tail one of the heads. Don't meant that there isn't a possibility, yes, the blonde said, nodding in agreement with Goro's assertion, and that is why you will all have an escort. You mean those missing nins? Shrugged. Can't be a missing nin if they think you're dead, besides they're loyal and were trained sensor nins, so they would be able to sense if they were being followed. And speaking of being followed, I heard you brought some of your family with you. Usually they're following you around like a pack of lost pups. Guro laughed and smirked. Well, about that, I took a walk through your old hood and found an old man and his daughter being pressed for protection money from some street rats. So you took care of them and had your guys start cleaning up the place after putting them under your protection, Naruto told him. This isn't the Konoha I loved when I was little. Or perhaps it's always been this way and I was just too blind to see it for what it was. The other guy grumbled, I've been here for a day and so far I've seen nothing but stuck-up clansmen, street trash, and drunks, but then again I've only seen a little bit of the village, but my first impression is that this is a place full of greed and lies. I have a feeling that we'll fit in perfectly here, Naruto said with a skewed smile. Shukuba town, literally, in town, was traversed cautiously by Undercover and Buyugao, and with good reason. A few miles from Konoha, it was a pleasure district with lots of hotels, inns, eateries, pubs, and brothels. She was traveling down one of the town's most repulsive streets, Fun Avenue. The intelligence department had already set her up with a false ID and a false background that included a few fictitious drug charges and assaults on the police. Her task was to join the local gang there and try to learn anything she could. Just in case they somehow managed to get in touch with someone to check on her. Setting everything up had taken some time. She had only received the assignment from the Hokage a week prior, and she had been preparing all that time. Shinha, the leader, was an orphan from the Mist Village whose parents had been murdered during the Civil War by an unidentified group that, ironically, had nothing to do with the conflict. Once you started looking in the right places, you could find information about him easily. He loved easy women, fast money, and parties. Even though she had been trained to degrade herself, she refused to do so. The simplest solution would be to get him in the sack and search the area after he went to sleep. Although it would take longer, it wasn't an issue, and she had the ideal plan. She was informed by sources that the gang was bringing in a sizable shipment and would seek to secure the exchange by hiring outside help. Additionally, it was an invitation only, but the previous evening she had located someone who had received one of these invitations and relieved him of it. Additionally, she had some of her Anbu friends organize a fictitious ambush in which they would kill some of the guards before she defeated them, saving the shipment and enhancing her standing with the gang. She only needed to show up and wait for the ambush because the shipment was scheduled to arrive today and everything was ready. As he sat in the rear of the ox-drawn cart, Naruto observed the ninjas accompanying him and his equipment and fish shipment as they made their way back to the village. The old man decided to assign 2 teams of ninja to accompany him, all of whom were members of his former academy class, because of the small caravan he was taking to Konoha. When he returned, their response was quite amusing. Flashback at the village gate, Naruto was leaning against the wall wearing one of his typical suits. This one was light gray, almost white, with a dark red shirt underneath. Since they had a good shipping company here in the village for items that a male ninja couldn't carry, he had instructed the Hokage to send the ninjas to the front gate while he had the carts ready. Wave's primary focus was shipping over water, so they had not yet acquired this. Knowing that an irate ox could destroy the cart and possibly the agreement the blonde had made with their boss, the 4 handlers calmed and harnessed the strong animals that were to pull the 4 carts back and forth from Wave. They also promised to pay more if they were hurried. Off to the side, a voice asked, "Where is this guy?" Naruto, who had not changed at all, turned to see Kiba, a noisy and gregarious mutt, and his dog, Akamaru. Hope N. Nothing happened to him. Naruto noticed Hinata standing beside an elderly woman wearing a white dress and having exotic red eyes from behind his sunglasses. 5 more people then left through the gates. Shino was the first to leave, approaching his team in silence and standing there without a word. The next older man Naruto saw was Asuma, the old man's son, who was smoking like his father but not from a pipe. 3 other academy members followed him. The plump Choji, the bossy blonde Ino, and the perpetually slothful Shikamaru. Kiba was too arrogant about things, and Ino was noisy, but that was the only real issue he had with this group. Shikamaru murmured, "Man, what a drag," as he gazed up at the clouds. Ino took a look around. "Hey, weren't we meeting the guy here? Just great, it's not even been an hour and things are already messing up." Without moving, Naruto said, "For a ninja you awfully impatient," attracting their attention. Not yet recognizing him, Asuma asked, "You the client?" "Why Asuma, I'm hurt that your father didn't tell you about me," Naruto said with a laugh as he pushed himself off the wall and made his way forward, revealing his face and causing their eyes to widen in amazement. No way, Ino exclaimed, gesturing toward him. "Naruto? Is that really you?" Kiba inquired. Like Guro, Naruto grinned and made a dramatic bow. "I the flesh," he said. "Dude, what are you doing here? I haven't seen you in years." Kiba replied, "Business. With my current position I really don't have to do anything and could live in the lap of luxury, waited on hand and foot day and night. But, unlike Shikamaru, I'm way too active for such an active lifestyle." "I kinda got that impression," Asuma said. "I saw that Dad had a few mission scrolls paid for by the same person, but I would have never expected that person to be you Naruto-kun. Wow, you've really grown up." Whoa, wait a minute," Ino said. "You mean to tell me that you, Naruto Uzumaki, the dead last in class, is rich enough to pay for multiple missions?" Ino reprimanded Asuma. No, it's okay Asuma," Naruto said, interrupting the individual. "It's completely understandable for her to be skeptical. After all, the last time I've stepped foot in this village I was a poor little orphan who couldn't afford a decent meal let alone a mission." "So you're loaded?" Ino. "Oh, extremely so," boasted Naruto, laughing. "You are looking at Lord Chairman." Another man came running up, gasping for air, and the others blinked in confusion as the blonde paused abruptly and sighed. Asuma and Kurenai exchanged glances before mouthing, "Lord Chairman?" "Hello Nishki," Naruto said sardonically. "I was just about to send for you, and it's very nice of you to join us." "Yeah right, I knew you told me to come to the wrong gate, you were just trying to get rid of me," Nishki growled, giving him a slight glare. Dropping the act, Naruto shrugged and said, "Sure was, but you're just like an STD, easy to find, hard to get rid of," which caused Nishki to gape. "Everyone, let me introduce my human shield." "Just ignore him, he's basically a living dictionary or calculator," Naruto said. Nishki moaned as she looked down. "Anyway, as I was saying, you're looking at the founder and chairman of the Black Rose Company." "No way." Choji choked on his chips. Everyone's eyes were on him. "What's the Black Rose Company?" Kiba asked, blinking. Choji stared at him. "It's only the greatest company in the world. My clan's been trying to buy into it ever since it was founded." Nodded. Yes, and every time your clan council keeps demanding company information, something that only few people such as myself are allowed to know, such as the information on how to make some of our high-class Black Rose delicacies, or more recently, how to brew our legendary Black Rose sake. We only give bottles of that to people who earned our favor, like the Fire Lord who asked my company to cater to his granddaughter's birthday. Naruto then posed for a moment. Then again, we really should tell them that no amount of money will bribe us into selling that. We don't even sell the bottles of sake, and Kami knows that people have tried to pay vast amounts of money for one. Choji's mouth was open and his eyes were wide as he pointed a finger at him. What are you doing back, Naruto? I thought you disliked Konoha, shouted Shikamaru, shaking his head and muttering something troublesome. Naruto brushed it off. All that mess it in the past, I've decided to be the bigger person and turn the other cheek. Nishki began in a professional manner, and the chairman isn't at liberty to discuss company. But Naruto grinned and gave him a slap on the back of the head. Nishki, shut up. Over half the village already know that the Black Rose is branching out, he said with an even voice before addressing the ninjas. As for your question, I am opening 2 new places here, the first being a tea house and the other being a sea-theme place. I have no doubt that they're going to be the next big thing around here. Then they went to the carts and sat down. The last one, as a matter of fact, this is the reason for this little mission. You will be escorting me and my living calculator here to Wave to pick up some very important things, and upon completion, you will all be rewarded with a free meal cooked personally by yours truly. You cook? Kiba asked, snickering. Nishki once again introduced himself, saying, actually the whole corporation is based around his very own recipes, before lowering his gaze once more and saying, sorry. Yes, Kiba, Naruto began, then slowly pulled out one of his razor-sharp cleavers from under his coat, causing the mud to gulp. And I'm very fond of using my skills for more than just cooking, so don't think that just because you continued along the path of becoming a ninja, you have become the proverbial alpha. Because unlike you, my friend, while you were doing the chores that Konoha passes on as missions, I was out in the real world, where you aren't pampered and given another chance if you make a mistake. But we're wasting daylight here just standing here, so let's get this show on the road and feel free to ride on one of the carts. I doubt that you'll be given the chance to ride on the way back, said the speaker, instantly reducing the seriousness of the situation. End of flashback. The trip has gone smoothly so far. Choji is eating from another bag of chips while Shikamaru lies in the back of one cart, watching the clouds. Both the driver, who sat up front and smoked like a snow country train, and their sensei were being ignored. Unaware that Kurenai viewed her as one of the fangirls who defamed people like her, Ino sat on another, preening herself with a small mirror before pulling out a brush and brushing her hair. Nishki was sitting on the front cart with Shino, who was surprisingly engaged in an intellectual conversation. Kiba, looking at the cart behind him, where Hinata was sitting next to Naruto with their feet hanging over the edge, scratched his head in confusion, not really understanding half of the big word being used. As everyone began loading onto the carts, Naruto had sent Nishki to a different cart and seized Hinata's wrist as she went by, requesting that she sit with him so they could converse. Sitting next to her old crush, who was gradually making a comeback, Hinata was incredibly shy and anxious. He was aware of her emotions. Only an idiot would not be. However, he didn't actually interact with any girls prior to leaving the village. He didn't learn that girls thought he was cute because of his whiskers until he left Konoha, which resulted in a series of events that eventually led him to a whorehouse where an older woman abused him by groping and cuddling him until he gave in to her advances. He wouldn't have done what he did if she hadn't shoved a bottle of sake down his throat. After hours of intense and obscene sex, the poor woman would never be able to enjoy her job. Naruto began, so Hinata-chan, smiling sweetly. How have you been? It's been years since I've seen you. Looking at the ground, Hinata almost whispered, I've been well, and Naruto-kun, blushing. Naruto gave her a hug. That's good to know. I've been meaning to see everyone since I returned, but things keep getting in the way. Naruto-kun, I have something that wanted to tell you, Hinata said tremblingly as she tried to spit it out and admit her feelings after swallowing hard. What's wrong, Hinata-chan? The blonde asked, raising her head to the side as she gazed at her. Despite opening her mouth, the girl was unable to speak. When the opportunity arose, she attempted to coerce herself into saying the words she had been wanting to say for years. She simply was unable to. She sighed as she looked down. It's nothing. 2 slightly older girls were sitting next to a young man in his late 20s who was lounging on a couch in a brothel. He wore a black tank top that flaunted his unimpressive arms and a small dragon tattoo around his shoulder, and his black hair was styled in a faux mohawk. Shinha. Sama, you should have seen it, a man said. That girl was fucking crazy. She saved the whole shipment after we were ambushed by some group. We even managed to keep both the money and the stuff thanks to her. Shinha asked his underling, who is this bitch? She's a merc, had multiple run-ins with the law, drug charges, and this crazy bitch has even fought and nearly killed an officer before, the goon said, pulling out a file and passing it to his leader. Interesting, Shinha said as she stood up. We need more people like that, people who aren't afraid of fighting pigs. I want to meet her, someone like this deserves to work under me. Someone wanted to meet her, so Yugao got the message to meet the gang at the brothel at around 10 o'clock the following day. Ignoring the perverts and whores, the purple-haired UC entered early and proceeded to the back, where she was instructed to go. However, two men in black suits moved in front of her before she could go very far. He told them, I was told to meet Shinha here, anticipating their movement. Shinha has no say right now, he is in a meeting with Mr. Taigga right now, said the first, who was wearing black sunglasses over his eyes and slowly shook his head. Who? Yugao asked, blinking and searching her mind for the name. Let's go, a snarling voice from the side said. Yugao had to look up to see the tall man's face as he turned. Most likely, he was the most physically intimidating man she had ever seen. The man she thought was Taigga was a good foot and a half taller than her, covered in muscle, and resembled one of those TV professional fighters. Yes, Mr. Taigga, said the two, bowing. After giving Yugao a quick glance, Taigga left the brothel and vanished. The man she was looking for was sitting on a couch, leaning on his elbows, his face in his hands, when she walked to the back. When she got closer, he looked up to see the bruise that was starting to form around his eye and the swelling of his lip. So you're the one my boys were telling me about, Shinha said, attempting to appear tough but failing because his words were slurred by the swelling. I heard about how you handled yourself and have a job for you, pays a lot more than those pissy guard jobs. A rival dealer has been selling product on our streets and have been stealing our customer, selling his shit at half our prices. But the thing is, we got our hands on some of it and found out that he was cutting it with something else. Something that will kill the user if used enough. I don't want his ass around threatening our customers or our business. Kill him and destroy any of his product you can. I don't want to see you face around here until you're done. The guy at the door will give you more detail. Yugao turned away after nodding. Goddamn Taigga, she heard the man say, and then he hissed. She snorted, served the prick right, and looked over her shoulder to see Shinha prodding at his lip. She wouldn't be shocked if he were frequently punched in the mouth given his attitude. However, it appeared that the reports were accurate and that they were only a small portion of a larger picture. She was instructed to infiltrate and learn everything she could about them, including their bosses and partners. Although it wasn't an order, Lord Hokage also asked her to compile as much information as she could about each crew member. She had learned the basic things thus far, such as the fact that the Fun brothel, the primary whorehouse on the street, was where they mostly congregated. Additionally, she would need to inform the Hokage that the investigator had been right and that they were a part of a bigger group. She was already aware that her task was going to become increasingly challenging. The Hokage would send her updated instructions after receiving her report, instructing her to approach, engage with the crew more deeply, and attempt to contact Shinha's boss. Sure, she would get paid more for the extra risk, but working undercover was messy, and there was a chance that you might get brainwashed in addition to having your morals occasionally thrown off. Many others had become so involved that they actually began to think like the enemy and even betrayed their former allies. Keeping pictures of your loved ones to remind you of who is waiting for you at home was the most basic lesson the Anbu tried to teach you on how to prevent such incidents. However, UCs were frequently called in for mental assessments, particularly following lengthy deep cover assignments, so it wasn't entirely trustworthy. Hey, you the chick Shinha? Sama sent? She nodded while glancing at the thug by the door. He pulled something out of his cloth-covered pocket and said, okay cool, listen, down the street you'll find an alley between the Rising Sun Inn and a bar called Ginyo's, the dealer's down that alley and behind the bar. When you find him, use this and leave it in, he said. Return when you're finished. If Shinha Sama has no more work for you I can also pay you for your work. It's not as big or high profile but the money's good. The thug pushed the item into her hand before backing away. I might not be like Shinha Sama but I have connections of my own, if you help me I can help you, he said. Skip 2 days in time. As the small caravan of carts came to a stop at the end of the bridge, Naruto nodded and looked down the town's main street, where people were out and about buying and selling anything they needed or wanted. Ah, the town of Wave, proof that even under the oppression of a tyrant you can find hope. The 8 ninjas surveyed the crowded street. I heard about this place, Asuma replied. Didn't Kakashi's team help rebuild the people here? Snorting, he probably wrote it in his report, but the truth is, All he did was protect the client. His words made the senseis look at him with disbelief. What, don't you find it strange that Wave has yet to ally itself with your village or even open any major trade agreements? In truth, Konoha left Wave to die out here. The council even threatened them, forcing them into debt. They had already paid all they could for the mission and were even worse off than before. They did what? The horrified ninja asked. Humming, I see that they tried to keep that quiet, but yes, the civilian council went behind the Hokage's back and threatened the town, demanding twice the amount that should have been paid and then demanding that the bridge be named after the village or that Uchiha. Upon examining the brass sign on the bridge, they noticed that it was named the Bridge of Hope rather than the Uchiha or Konoha. As you can see, it didn't happen. The old man received a nice letter explaining the circumstances and then the threats made by the council. To make it up to them, he voided their debt and punished the ones who kept pushing for it, namely some old man named Danzo and some whore with pink hair, never did get her name. The oxes were driven down toward the docks to continue the journey. I can only imagine the looks on their faces when they found out that Wave refused to ever allow trade with them, especially with the dock being a quick way to travel as well as being a major importer of fish. Shino gave a nod. That would explain the sudden increase in the price of fish. The blonde said, even with Gado running things, he had control over import and export. He wasn't stupid and knew that keeping it going would make him more money. As they reached the right place, as he patted a stack of crates, one of the dock workers yelled, Mr. Uzumaki, we've been expecting you. We're ready to offload your things whenever you're ready. All you need to do is sign for them. After leaping from the cart and stretching, Naruto approached, accompanied by the ninja and his devoted dog Nishki. Pulling a pen from his pocket, the foreman took a small stack of papers off the top of the crate and said, okay, before you sign, let me walk you through here to make sure you have everything you wanted. Here we have a crate of industrial aquarium supplies. Pointing and tapping the crate with the pen. This is the industrial shatterproof glass rated to withstand even chakra-powered strikes, as long as it's not constantly attacked. The foreman signaled for the workers to begin loading them after Naruto signed for them. All of the crates would occupy at least the first cart. Okay sir, please follow me to the next area. Due to the nature of these shipments, we had to separate them so that they could be cared for. When they arrived at a warehouse, they discovered a line of big wooden crates with their tops taken off. There were several heavy plastic water-filled boxes inside. The ninja gasped as the group approached and peered into the closest one. They're beautiful, Ino, Hinata, and Kurenai remarked as they gazed at the container's contents. Here we have over 100 exotic Centropy. Centropage loriculus, better known as flame angel fish, said Naruto, shaking his head. They had electric blue markings on the tail fin and black stripes running the length of their bright reddish-orange body. They were very pretty, as the girls had said. Similar responses followed, and Naruto's attempt to pronounce the fish's name prevented the man from coming across as foolish. He muttered loudly, Zebrasoma flavescens, or yellow tang, as he gazed at the vast school of tiny yellow fish. The guys were impressed by the next few. Pulling on Naruto's sleeve, Hinata, who had taken to standing beside him, stammered, N. Naruto.kun, why? Why.u.s? Sharks? The others, especially Nishki, went pale at the prospect of him getting bitten. He nodded and said, Blacktip reef shark to be exact, as he dipped his hand into the water and rubbed it. It does well in captivity and those large aquariums often keep them, so why not buy a whole family to keep as pets? Kurenai, Kiba, Asuma, and Nishki were all wet when the shark abruptly thrashed a little, creating a large splash. I knew I'd love having a pet shark, Naruto said, laughing and patting the shark as the others shared a few cheesy giggles. Skip one day in time. With the exception of the occasional road bump that made the wheel dip or the sound of a distant animal, the paths were comparatively quiet as the convoy made its way through the forest. Asuma once more sat with his new smoking buddy in the final cart, while Kurenai positioned himself on a crate in the front cart as the ninja divided up and each took a cart to guard. Despite their expectations that they would have to walk the remaining distance home, they were reassured that the crates were sturdy and suitable for sitting on. Once more, Hinata and Naruto were on the same one. Choji started asking him for advice on how to make cooking better. It wasn't a big deal. The blonde didn't mind, primarily because he was free to divulge any information he desired. However, the information he was asked to provide was typically found in the menu, explaining to the customer how particular items were prepared or cooked, primarily to support the 17,000 yen check they were given. Choji, who rarely paid attention to the bag of chips in his hand, asked, Why is it so expensive? In a tone that would have made Iruka proud, Naruto said, Well, you have to look at it the way we do. Wagyu cattle provide some of the highest quality meat and we try not to use chemically altered shirt, he spat out, adding, Sure, using the cattle that only take a fraction of the time to raise would lower the price, but what are you going to do when you see kids around 10 years old looking like they have kids of their own? I never really thought of that, Shoji said, blinking. But even then, an 8-ounce cut costs 13,200 yen. We sometimes dry-age it for days. That alone is expensive and challenging, especially when you push the normal aging period. How long do you age them? Depending on what the person wants, it could be anywhere between 7 to 20.1 days. But the Fire Lord requested the best steak we could make, so we pushed it. 45 days. I half expected it to turn out bad, but he said it was the best steak he ever tasted. Though it wasn't as pleasant as spending time alone with him, Hinata chose to sit and listen to Naruto converse with Choji because she felt that it was preferable to being unable to speak out of embarrassment. Hinata jumped a little when Naruto said, "So Hinata-chan, what's your favorite dish?" She would have said, "Anything you cook, Naruto-kun, as long as we shared it," if she had been brave enough. Unfortunately, she was as bold and self-assured as a mouse in a cat-filled house. See. Cinnamon buns. Naruto gave a slight smirk. "Oh, someone's got a sweet tooth, but you're in luck. We have something that you'd enjoy too. Cinnamon pull-aparts." Imagine a huge cinnamon bun as large as a cake that you can pull apart with your hands. The sound of that and the accompanying mental images had the people listening drooling. I'll admit that it wasn't one of my own creations. Only a grandmother could think of something so sweet that it'll spoil you just as much as it'll rot your teeth, the blonde said with his eyes closed. O.L. Amaya, or as we used to call her, Old Granny Sweet Tooth, almost had a heart attack when I gave her cut of the profits when I bought out her little sweets shop. Stabbed me with a cookie cutter too after I called her that too. Gazing downward, Naruto recalled the time he had stitches in the shape of a gingerbread man on his back, surrounded by half of the gingerbread man's family. That made everyone in the group snicker cheaply, and then there was a brief hush. After a while, the plump boy asked, "Why do you carry around a butcher's knife?" Everyone who knew Shikamaru's mother snickered when Naruto shrugged and said, "Better than carrying around a cast iron skillet." Loud enough for everyone to hear. Shikamaru's mother was notorious for carrying around said item in a scroll and hitting anyone who irritated her. Shikamaru moaned and put his arm over his face. Sarutobi sighed slightly as he read Yugo's report. He had assumed the gang was merely a gang of drug dealers, but Yugo had doubts. They were a serious problem because they were also prepared to kill other dealers. On the other hand, it appeared that they were targeting the dealer because he might be hurting the users. They would have to leave the gang alone for a while because, as much as he hated to do it, he would have to have her investigate further and discover who was actually in charge. If they were caught right after someone new joined the gang, it would appear suspicious. The bosses would assume Yugo was a mole because these clever people managed to stay hidden for so long without the leaf noticing. When the old Hokage picked up a blank scroll to send back to her, he wrote everything in code that, depending on the UC's location or his emotions, could appear as anything from bills to letters from loved ones to love notes. He quickly wrote the orders in the form of a love letter, which he thought was funny. Then he turned to face the messenger hawk perched on a pile of papers and gave it the small object so it could clutch it in its talons and take off through the open window. After they had packed up camp for the day and started to head towards Konoha, Naruto kept talking to Choji occasionally about cooking, giving him advice, and other things to kill time. Like an overly committed student, Choji had somehow located a small notebook and was taking notes on almost everything the blonde said, especially after the previous evening. After setting up camp near a stream, Kiba remarked to Naruto that his cooking abilities were not as good as he claimed, giving them a real taste of why Naruto's business was so successful. To his and everyone else's relief, Naruto simply untucked his shirt tail and said that he'd just have to prove it by cooking some fish from the stream. The dog boy had only remembered that the blonde had a large cleaver and could use it after Naruto smirked and reached under his coat tail. It was the fastest Choji had ever moved in his life. Not even taking off his sandals, he had leapt to his feet, shouted that he would catch the fish, and shot off towards the water. A minute later, he surfaced with a trout clenched in his teeth. Even though that was hilarious, nobody laughed until Naruto said it. "I was unaware that bears were present in this area," he said, pointing out that Choji had actually caught a trout better than any bear. Asuma even mentally noted that he could use this to persuade Choji to put in more effort in his training. Some assisted in gathering firewood, catching fish, or picking leaves that Naruto pointed out to them. Naruto was a master at cleaning and gutting the fish they caught, chopping, cutting, and scraping with a cleaver as if he were going to cut off a finger. After that, he applied the seemingly arbitrary items they had chosen to the meat before mounting them on tiny pikes and setting them over the fire. Kiba had wanted to eat at the time, but Naruto struck the back of his hand with the blunt end of his cleaver, causing a bruise and causing the mud to snatch his hand back in agony. They waited for a good few minutes before the smell reached them. As a result, they were made to wait longer while being tormented by the stench and powerless to stop it. Therefore, Naruto gave a fish to everyone, including the 4 men operating the oxes, as soon as he decided it was ready to eat. In addition to receiving his own fish, Akamaru was ecstatic when the others gave him bones, which also tasted delicious. As much as he hated to admit it, Kiba bowed his head and apologized strangledly, but when Akamaru growled and bit him, he yelled. Kiba gave a better one, calling him a traitor, and confessed that he had never been a fish lover. Instead of sharing a tent with one of the guys, Naruto chose to sleep under the stars and moon that night by lying on top of one of the crates in the cart. The caravan on the forest road jerked to a sudden stop. Naruto yelled, "Shit," before tumbling backward and colliding with the crate with his head. "What the fuck's the problem?" he hissed angrily as he sat up and rubbed his head. A group of filthy-looking men, including a few women, were standing in the center of the road. They were all smiling and brandishing some kind of weapon. A woman in the center said, "Thanks for the stuff, we'll be taking all this off your hands, now get off the wagons and hand over everything." As he turned to observe, Naruto said, "Time to earn your pay, guys, looking at the ninja. Show me how well Konoha trains their ninja." The ensuing battle was pitiful and depressing to witness. The robbers who had assumed that the small caravan would be an easy target had never anticipated that more than half of them were skilled ninjas, and as a result, they were quickly defeated by the 2 Junin and 6 Genin. Since his father was the custodian of the scroll and had given him permission to sign the boss summons acceptance, Asuma called forth a monkey to inform the local police or Anbu, if they were near the village, to have these bandits apprehended and taken to prison. "Not to rain on your parade or anything, but you missed one," Naruto said loudly after the Junin commended their Genin for handling themselves. They saw the bandit leader attempting to tiptoe away where he pointed. Kurenai quickly used genjutsu, causing the woman to freeze and then pass out. She became somewhat of Shinha's go-to girl, after being assassinated for the gang. However, most of them were scared to do any wet work for fear of being arrested, so since she wasn't, Shinha had her find another rival for him. However, Shinha gave her no other jobs after that, and even though she gained their respect, the others didn't really consider her one of them. She was aware that she would need to gain the respect of the higher-ranking ninja if she truly wanted to obtain the information she required. This was essentially the same situation back home, where most of the higher-ranking ninja showed no respect for academy students, but after graduating, you gained some respect, and then you were able to do missions for your home, earning even more respect after you gained enough experience. With each rank, you were given more knowledge than before, with academy students only being allowed to learn the fundamentals and genin being taught lower-ranked information and never trusted with any village secrets. However, as you grew older and demonstrated your reliability, you were granted access to more knowledge. She would need to gain more respect, which would require her to work for the gang more, but she was fortunate to know that the previous guy would have worked for her. She knew that it was her new orders from the Hokage when she saw a hawk fly toward her room at the inn while she was looking up at the sky. A few hours after noon, the village gates appeared on the horizon, and the ninjas dismounted their carts once they were permitted entry. "Well, guys and girls, it's been a blast. Tell the old man that I'll see him later," Naruto said, smirking lazily as he slid around to face them. "Oh, and I'll need some assistance finishing up my place later, so come find me if you ever need some side work." "Sir, don't forget that you have a business meeting this evening," Nishki said as he popped his back and slid off the side to stretch his legs. The blonde nodded, rubbing his temples and muttering, "Ah yes, I almost forgot," before turning to face the group again. "Well, I'll see you all later. I have to go to my hotel and take a shower. Show these men where to store them and where to take this, Nishki. I'll drop by later tonight to check on things, and Tazuna already knows what I want done." Kiba said, "See you later, man," and Akamaru responded by barking, which was Kiba's way of saying the same thing. Hinata waved briefly before departing to deliver their reports and receive payment, as did the others. A mother and her child, an elderly couple strolling together in the sun, and even a young man who glanced at him were among the few lingerers on the quiet walk back to his hotel. The lunch rush had ended hours earlier, and most people had already returned to their jobs. Naruto hurried past the man before he could move, arrived at the hotel lobby, boarded the elevator, and pressed the button. Naruto waited until the elevator reached the top, dinged, and began to disembark, only to be seized and dragged away as the doors opened. 2 legs wrapped around his waist, 2 hands gripped the back of his head, and a pair of lips crashed into his hungrily. After a few seconds of the forced kiss, the girl pulled away with a cunning, lustful smile, according to the 2 soft pillows resting against his chest. "Naruto. Sama, I missed you so much. Where have you been?" How in the world did you get up here? Naruto asked, rubbing her behind. As she planted tiny kisses on his neck and cheek, he asked, only certain people are permitted up here. The redhead flushed and said, well, I sorta maybe took the key to get up here from that guy that came to visit you, as she grasped his shoulders with one arm and took a hotel key from between her breasts. Naruto recalled the moment he laughed when he saw her bump past Nishki. I see, clever little minx, he muttered as he escorted her to his door and unlocked it with her key, forgetting to check his wallet and other belongings after she had gone. After carrying her inside and locking the door, he tossed the key aside and said, you hear me, Sasiko? I have a meeting coming up and need to take a shower, so I don't have much time to mess around. Then let's fuck around in the shower, she said, nodding and giving him another seductive glance. Naruto's next destination was the unused sector of the village near Training Ground 44, which was surrounded by mostly unused forests owned by the village that no one had the courage to purchase because it was so close to the scary forest. Pussies. Naruto got dressed and escorted Sasiko out, making sure he had both keys with him. Ignoring the few ninja who stared at him in astonishment, he walked along the paths, trying to understand why a civilian, and a well-dressed one at that, was heading for the forests. While it wasn't against the law for civilians to be there, most had avoided them because they were afraid of being accidentally struck by a ninja. When he arrived at his destination, he discovered a group of older men and a woman wearing kimonos, along with Guro, who detested wearing them unless absolutely necessary, conversing with one another while younger men in suits stood around the clearing, scanning for threats. Lord Chairman, bowed one of the younger men, who were still older than Naruto. With the exception of the older men, who merely nodded courteously but subtly, everyone else took notice of this and did the same. The youngest man among the older ones said, Lord Chairman, it's nice to see you again. His name was Osamu Kashiwagi, the head of the Fuma family, and he was dressed in a dark blue kimono. His black hair was parted on the side and combed to the right, but the most striking feature was the scar that ran from his left cheekbone across his nose and ended just under his right eye. They didn't have to worry about Osamu becoming hungry or anything because he had been Shintaro's best friend and would sooner kill himself than damage the man's reputation or position. Osamu wasn't the legitimate head of the family, but they allowed him to take over as head temporarily after Shintaro Fumas passed away until an heir was found or it was decided to leave him in that role. The Fuma were once one of the largest families under the Kurabara clan banner, but a split over leadership caused a large portion of them to leave the clan. It had hurt Shintaro to see his family split up, but he would rather see them walk away peacefully than be chopped down and thrown into a hole. Normally, finding a blood heir would be simple. The woman, wearing a white kimono with a sword strapped beneath the obi, said, Hello Lord Naruto, in a formal and regal tone. She was Yayoi Dojima, the widow and wife of Sohei Dojima, who had also passed away. Unlike the Fuma, Sohei had a wife who could take charge of the family before it disintegrated, using her position as the one who could battle with a sword just as skillfully as any man and frequently give Sohei instructions. However, unlike Fuma, who passed away in his sleep due to stress and heart issues, Sohei was killed by one of his own subordinates who believed he could take over and even force Yayoi to marry him. Yayoi's role as the clan's leader was solidified when she set up an ambush for the man, who unintentionally walked right into it, thinking he would be getting into her pants. Unfortunately for him, instead of fucking the beautiful older woman, she and a group of her supporters fucked him up before dragging him to the blonde chairman's feet, requesting permission to kill him because Yayoi didn't yet have the authority to mark someone for death. The next man, wearing a blue kimono, simply nodded. His name was Futoshi Shimano, the leader of the Shimano family, which was in charge of most of the operations in Demon Country abroad. He was bald and a beast of a man, and he and Naruto frequently sparred whenever they had free time, usually ending in a fair fight. However, they both knew that although he had the physical strength, Naruto had the intelligence, and they frequently used his attacks against him, such as the time the blonde broke his own hand after he ducked a punch that landed on a metal pole. Guro called out, Hey Ruto-chan, and everyone started to perspire. Way to destroy the mood, Guro, sighed Naruto. Although they were all close friends, Yayoi held Guro in low regard because she preferred things to be formal and according to custom, particularly when it came to showing the chairman, who bestowed their position of authority within the clan, the respect he deserved. Anyway, the reason I asked you out to this Kami. Forsaken clearing the forest is simple, the blonde said, clearing his throat. In addition to being far away and avoided, this is where I intend to construct our new compound. Yes, I have read about this place. It's fairly close to the Forest of Death, so most villagers will stay away, Osamu said, rubbing his scarred nose. After what it did to you, why would you want another clan compound here? Futoshi snorted. What better way to get back at them than to rub my success in their faces? Naruto said, his normally composed face breaking into an evil grin. He laughed, making the younger Yakuza shudder. I can't come out and kill them because it's bad of business. You can't force a dead body to pay or suffer. I also wanted to tell you that the meeting will be on the final day of the festival, so enjoy yourselves and tell the others to expect a message that day and to be prepared to come to the location. I want it to be over by midnight to see the fireworks. Oh, so while everyone is preparing, the finally will be discussing our business, was the concept that Yayoi grasped. Naruto nodded and said, yes, we'll be right under their noses, plotting, while they're looking up and waiting for the fireworks. Now, do you have any questions before this brief gathering ends? According to Futoshi, who cleared his throat, Taigga sent word that Shinha hasn't been earning. He's a small-time soldier in my clan, sir. Ordinarily, that would be an issue, but since Fire Country had been formally split up among the clans, everything was under Naruto's total control until he stated otherwise. Yes, Futoshi, I know about him, and now I'm ordering you to kill them. Everyone was taken aback by this since Naruto rarely gave orders to mark and kill clan members, much less members of another person's family. Sir? I had an interesting encounter with a ninja in the Hokage town. She was carrying a stack of files and scrolls, Naruto said, glaring at him. One of them was a member of the gang. If there was one rule Naruto imposed, it was that the Kurabara clan should never be in the public eye. Regardless of who it was, they were expected to die in order to preserve the clan's secrecy if they threatened to break under the pressure. I understand, sir, Futoshi said with a nod, but what about the girl? With a raised eyebrow, Naruto said, girl? Which girl? As his own personal enforcer, Shinha has enlisted a woman into his gang, sir. In all honesty, she is very talented and… Naruto interrupted him, saying, Futoshi, do what you have to do. Whether you let her live or not is up to you. I have faith that you won't make another error. Otherwise. After failing Naruto and the rest of the clan, Futoshi bowed his head and felt a ghostly pain strike his hand, precisely where he had cut the tip of his own pinky. Of course, Lord Chairman nodded. All right, this meeting is over. Feel free to enjoy yourselves until the meeting. I shall be leaving for a few days soon to oversee another shipment. Also, Yayoi, I leave you in charge of getting our compound built. Mr. Tazuna is in town, so talk to him if you want or contract someone else, just get it done. Yes, Lord Naruto, she said, nodding. As he turned to go, the other underlings bowed and the four nodded at him. Oh, and one last thing. If you ever send someone like Nishki to watch over me, I'll shove my foot up your asses. He then turned to Yayoi and said, and I promise, you won't like it. As he brought up their one night stand, in which he not only made passionate love to her but also plowed her ass until she was unable to sit at the following day's meeting, the woman turned a deep red. That was the day her grief officially ended, and she was given her husband's position as head of the family. She didn't regret their one night stand, but she didn't want it to happen with just anyone. You see, she had just avenged her husband by killing the man who had stabbed him to death, and she started drinking with Naruto, who kept her company and made sure she didn't do anything too reckless or lonely, allowing her to cry on his shoulder or simply talk about Sohei. They all sighed as he vanished and laughed uneasily as he left. Guro turned to face Yayoi and asked, what did he mean by, you won't like it, which caused her to flush. Then she slapped him as hard as she could, knocking him to the ground, and then she stormed off, her bodyguards in tow. It was a young evening when Naruto arrived at the construction site for his water-themed restaurant. Almost everything except the finishing touches had been finished, and some people were already laying down a dark sea blue carpet while others put together the enormous aquarium wall. The entire facility would be 2 stories high, with the top floor reserved for high-paying VIPs and the bottom floor open to anyone who made a reservation. The first floor would give the impression that you were in the middle of water, with fish swimming all around you, and the second floor would give you the impression that you were standing on the water, gazing down at the crystal clear water below. One section of the tank had already been set up, and the carpet had been laid. He could open for business as soon as the kitchen was ready, but he had no intention of working there. Instead, he would send one of the up-and-coming chefs from another establishment who had been working as an apprentice for the head chef to take over as head chef here. He would likely stay for a few days to make sure he didn't make a mistake, but soon clan guards would take over for security. Naruto and Nishki stood in the finished corner, examining a clipboard. Tell me, Nishki. Food shipments are anticipated to arrive by tomorrow, and the tables and chairs are already set up in the back. Yes, sir, they're ahead of schedule for some reason, Nishki said with a nod. He pointed to a few items on the paper and said, they haven't even been able to get the freezer working yet, and some of the stuff needs to be put on ice just as soon as it gets here. But the freezer is up and connected to the kitchen, Naruto hummed. Yes sir, all right. Then get some guys and buy a ton of ice. Turning the page, Naruto said to him, how are my fish? When the stuff arrives, stack it in a corner and encircle it with the bags of ice. I'll see about getting the guys to hurry up on wiring the freezer sooner. They're well taken care of. I sent someone to that pet store to buy some fish food for those small fish and got a few bigger ones to feed the sharks. That's good Nishki, I'm proud to see that you've forgiven the sharks for ruining your suit. The young man scowled. He still hadn't moved on from it, but he had to let it go because he would be in hot water if the overgrown fish died while he was watching. Oh. Yes. One of the Goro's men, identified by the small gold button on his lapel, approached and bowed. Sir, Mr. Guro has sent me to help out around here, he said. Naruto replied, yes I know, I saw you a while ago watching the front door. As a sign of respect, the Majima family soldier lowered his head while straightening and said, well, Lord Chairman, there's a young girl at the front, she says that you invited her. Reflecting, Naruto said, young girl. He muttered, attempting to recall whether he had invited anyone. How did she look? Oh. Wears purple, has blonde hair, and light baby blue eyes, and she's a ninja, in my opinion. After realizing who it was, the blonde boss said, "Ah, yes, send her on in." To let the girl in, the Majima soldier jogged back to the door. Is it wise for us to hire ninjas, sir? I mean, allowing them to do even the smallest tasks could put us in danger, Nishki said uneasily. Naruto pushed the clipboard into Nishki's chest and waved him away, saying, "Oh, calm down Nishki. I'm not going to let them do the things you think. I only need them to do quick deliveries or help finish some work." Why? Yes sir. After a moment, Ino entered and glanced around before spotting him and waving, "Hey Naruto-kun." Thinking of the way she had treated him in the academy, he waved back. He wouldn't be mean to her, nor would he be overly nice, because although she didn't try to stop them or be nice to him. She wasn't a complete bitch for the Uchiha like Sakura, but she was still a fangirl and had hit him a few times for calling Sasuke a fag. As she approached him, he remarked, "Ino, what a surprise, I didn't expect to see you again today. You see, after a mission I like to go shopping and I found this cute little dress but didn't have enough money for it," Ino said, putting on her best little smile. "Then I recalled that you promised to compensate us for performing small, odd tasks and so forth." With a little laugh, Naruto said, "I see." He turned to Nishki and said, "Nishki, give me the letters," after saying, "Well, Ino, since you didn't just come in and ask for a handout, I think I can find you a job." After placing the clipboard beneath his arm, Nishki reached into his coat's inside pocket, took out 4 letters, and gave them to Naruto. "I need all of these letters delivered by hand tonight before midnight, and since you're a ninja, I know you'll finish it in an hour or 2. For all these letters, I'll pay you the usual village courier fee." He handed her the first 2 letters and then held up the third, saying, "This goes to a man named Chizuna. He should be working at the construction site in Sector 5. You can give these 2 to the person at the Baika Inn's front desk. They both have the person's name on them, so they'll take care of it." With caution, Ino placed the 3 letters in her hip pouch. "This last one goes to the Hokage. Wait for him to read it and tell me what he says. When you return, I'll pay you." He handed her the last letter and waved his hand in a shooing motion. After saying, "Okay Naruto-kun, I see you soon," Ino turned and ran out the door. Naruto watched her go, or rather, her ass, as the purple skirt hung over her back as she ran, and he almost wished she had turned down the job in favor of something faster and more lucrative, because if she had, he would have lost his respect for her and given her only one option, which would have turned her into a woman and a whore. Taigga sat in a small tea house in Shukuba town. Despite his love of violence and his enormous stature, which was only surpassed by his boss and family head, he frequently enjoyed a cup of warm tea. He occasionally had his subordinates sit down with him and drink tea with him, becoming violent when they attempted to leave. Taigga, a young woman in a bluish-black suit, was sitting next to him at another table, reading a paper, when he was startled out of his reverie by the sound of someone calling his name. "What are you doing here, Miss Shion?" Futoshi's top enforcer, Miss Natsumi Shion, also known as Ms. N Shion. Was notoriously cruel and sadistic to anyone who enraged her. Even Futoshi tried to keep her happy and dreaded having to fight her. Other family members suspected that she was insane, which is why she was given the nickname Nzane, which sounded like insane, but don't let her hear you call her that. The only reason Lord Chairman wasn't terrified of her at all was that she was, as they put it, a fangirl for him. Or was she just incredibly crazy for him? Oh well, everything was okay as long as she remained composed. "Futoshi-san has new orders for you, straight from Lord Chairman himself," Shion said evenly as she turned the page of the paper. She then folded it, placed it on the table, got up, and walked away. As she walked away, Taigga snatched up the paper. He had sent her to deliver a message, which implied that it was important to her that she wanted to do it because Naruto had given the order. A small envelope fell out onto the table as he opened the paper and shook it, and as he read the letter, his face became more and more grim. An hour had gone by when Ino left to deliver the letters. The first two were easy, but it took some time to find Tazuna. She was particularly affected by waiting for an audience with the Hokage, but he wasn't overly busy, so he rescheduled his next meeting to see her after informing him that it was a letter from Naruto. As she made her way back inside the structure, she searched for Naruto but couldn't find him. Ino, a voice called from her side. "Oh, mister. Where is Naruto-kun, Nishki?" "Well," said Nishki, scratching his head. Flashback. While Nishki assisted with the more numerically oriented tasks, such as tax forms, Naruto rummaged through a stack of business-related paperwork that he needed to complete and submit to the elderly man before formally opening for business. There wasn't much to complete, just a few things like the name, owner, insurance, and so on. His pen was hovering just above the paper when he suddenly froze. "Mr. Nishki. I sense something is off, as if something malevolent is about to happen," Naruto muttered as he peered around. "I told you not to eat those shellfish, it's not that dumbass, it feels like," Naruto said, giving him a slap on the back of the head. His eyes widened, and he said, "Nishki, get this over with, I'm going to hide in my hotel room." As his boss slid the papers to him and ran out of the room, leaving a trail of dust behind him, Nishki blinked. End of flashback. Pulling a small folded stack of yen notes out of his pocket, Nishki shook his head and said, "Anyway, since he's not here, I've been left in charge. 5,012 yen, it should cover everything," he said. "Working for Naruto-kun is almost better than doing missions for the village," Ino grinned after accepting it. "Fast and easy money, but always in short supply," shrugged Nishki. "What? We have people to do these kinds of tasks. We don't typically hire outside sources. You're fortunate because we currently have a shortage of employees and more will be joining us soon, which will reduce the number of available positions for individuals like you." The Majima soldier shouted from the front, "On Nishki-san, we have a problem." After surveying Ino, Nishki excused himself and hurried to the door, asking, "What is it?" He gestured to a young woman who was humming as she approached them with a confident demeanor. She had curly brown hair that cascaded down her back, rosy red lips, and stunning doe brown eyes. She was wearing a bright pink kimono with large flowers all over it. He could only say, "Oh shit," as the girl drew closer and met his gaze. "Hey, boys." She sighed and smiled sensuously before stopping directly in front of them and exposing her chest beneath the kimono. "Hello, Ms. Sabaki. What are you doing here?" Nishki began to perspire. "Far from the land of vegetables, where you live." "Oh, my father and I came here to enjoy the festival this year. You can imagine how surprised I was to learn that Naruto-kun was branching out here. I had to come see him," the girl giggled. "He's fortunate that I like him so much because I would have dumped him and found a new boyfriend if I hadn't seen him since our last date." They both knew who this girl was. Well, almost everyone did, but this clarified why Naruto had run away not too long ago. You see, Nishki and the soldier exchanged glances. Naruto needed a trade agreement in the land of veggies years ago, but they weren't trading outside of their territory because they were going through an isolationist phase. He therefore looked to the less acceptable ways to compel a trade leader to sign a contract with him. Mr. Sabaki was a man whose wife had died, leaving him with a teenage daughter whom he lavished with royal treatment. Thus, behind her father's back, Naruto began meeting with her and flirting with her, being the slick, smooth, talking person that he was. By the time he realized what was happening, Naruto had deflowered his young daughter and was threatening to make her disappear, in addition to publishing images of her in magazines that weren't particularly flattering. Although the entire story was unknown, everyone was aware that Naruto had threatened the man until he started crying. The girl was adamantly unaware of what her true love did, and even if he had told her, she would have denied it, claiming that her future husband would never act in such a manner. Nishki calmly stated, "Well, Ms. Sabaki, he's not here. No one knows where he is." He made an effort to avoid coming across as dishonest. "Oppo and I thought that I'd get to see my love here today." She sighed, looking him in the eye for a minute. "Oh well, tell Naruto-kun that his baby came to see him." As she left, they sighed. "Should we tell Lord Chairman?" the soldier inquired. "No, I have a feeling that he already knows," said Nishki, shaking his head. Naruto sighed to himself as he sat in his hotel room. He was hiding in his own room for an ex-partner, making him one of the youngest, if not the youngest, most prosperous businessmen. The mighty had fallen, oh how. He took a bottle of complimentary wine that had arrived in the refrigerator from its spot on the floor next to him, sipped it straight from the bottle, and leaned back in the armchair with his feet propped up on the coffee table. This simply wasn't him. He had to hide in his room drinking to forget about her, even though there were many more dangerous or frightening people than her. He had never loved her, and he didn't even feel a little depressed when he silently left her. To him, she served only as a means of relying on her father. Nevertheless, they did enjoy spending time together. Flashback. Don't mention it, Ms. Sabaki. Nothing is too expensive for you, Naruto said to the girl across from him, flashing his lady killer grin as he finished a full course spider crab meal. Even though her father treats her like royalty, Ms. Sabaki blushed because she had never had anyone, much less a handsome guy, compliment her or take her out on a date since her mother died. Unfortunately, her father kept the many suitors who would have been vying for her hand in marriage at bay. She laughed and said, "Oh Naruto-kun, please, call me Suki." "Suki Sabaki," he whispered, "just the sound of your name tells all who hear it that you hold the keys to heaven, that when Kami-sama made you the mound broke. You truly are a one-of-a-kind lady." Taking her hand, the blonde gave it a gentle kiss. "Naruto-kun, you tease," Suki said, swiping at him in jest. "My dear, I am not teasing. How you have remained single all this time is beyond me," he said, catching her and kissing her. "Maybe I'm just waiting for that right guy to come sweep me off my feet and show me what I'm missing." He smirked foxily at her while looking into her eyes. "Suki, I may not be perfect, but if you'll have me, I'd like to be the one to show you," he said, reaching up and holding out his hand to her. "Please do, Naruto-kun. We've been going out for weeks now and I've been waiting for you to say that," he said as she took his hand and he raised her up. "Suki-chan, after tonight, you'll see the world in a whole different light," Naruto said, putting his arm around her. End of flashback. She had given herself to him at the Harvest Festival after he had taken her out of the village for a week and taken her everywhere to see the surrounding countryside and any festivals he could. The unfortunate girl might have been the epitome of virginity. Other than the fact that Objecta went into slot B and that this was how babies were made, she knew nothing about sex. She sobbed as he broke through and became alarmed upon seeing the blood when he took her for the first time. However, Naruto soothed her and, once the pain subsided, gently carried her until she pleaded for more. Unfortunately for her, Naruto fucked her until she passed out and kept doing it for the rest of the night after growing tired of that slow fucking. He got to do anything he wanted to her, even though it wasn't as much fun because she was unconscious. Cummins in her mouth and asshole, nutting on her face, ass cheeks, back, and even around her pussy and thighs, fucking her in the mouth, getting himself a titty fuck, and even testing out her ass a couple of times. After that, he took several images that were too blurry for even porn magazines to publish. Everything from close dot-ups of the semen dripping from her holes to full body spread eagle shots. He then cleaned her up and hid the pictures before settling into the bed next to her. She asked him why her butt hurt when she woke up, and he explained that it was because she had tripped. She bought it brilliantly, and after spending a day with him and having more sex, she declared her desire to live out the rest of her days with him. That spoiled the moment for him, and he informed her that he would have to take her home because he was far too busy to settle down. She argued with him about it and tried to persuade him to take her with him, claiming they could flee and get married. Naruto responded that he couldn't and that he had to move around for work. That it would be impossible with a wife and, God forbid, children. After he brought her home, her father became enraged and threatened to have him arrested for kidnapping. However, Naruto sent Suki to her room to recuperate from the trip and calmly informed the man that it would be best for him to calm down and speak with him privately. Flashback in his office, Mr. Sabaki scowled at the blonde seated across from him. This boy had the audacity to demand that his child calm down after taking him somewhere unknown to Kami. "Tell me, boy, why shouldn't I have you arrested for kidnapping my little girl?" With a sly smile, Naruto gave him a document. "You really think that I will sign this?" Mr. Sabaki asked, snatching it from his grasp and laughing angrily. "I already told you no," he said. With a devilish grin, the blonde said, "Mr. Sabaki, I know that you will sign these or else." "Or else what?" "Or else the world will know that your little girl is nothing more than my little whore," Naruto said to him, seemingly referring to the weather. "Don't you dare call my little Suki a whore," Sabaki yelled while leaping out of his chair. The man stared in horror at the pictures of his child's covered body as Naruto merely grabbed the pictures out of his pocket and tossed them onto the desk. "Mr. Sabaki, weeks ago when you rudely rejected my proposal for a trade agreement I promised you that you'd regret it. I was completely fair in my previous contract, but you tore it apart without even reading all of it. He unfolded the new agreement and said, now, unless you want me to publish the rest of these, allowing the world to know how much of a slut your daughter is and letting all sorts of men masturbate to your child's nude body, you will sign this paper and trade with me. But seeing as you basically spat in my face the last time, you will sell them to me at 20% off. I should have you arrested for this, Mr. Sabaki said, giving him a feeble glare. Naruto reached for him and choked him with it. Fool, I'd like to see you try. I'll buy myself out of prison and leave the country, then have my men kidnap her from your home. Then when I had my fun I'll sell her to a slaver. They're always looking for young girls to train as sex slaves. The man's eyes were watering. Could you live with that? Could you go on knowing that because of your own stubbornness, the last link you have to your late wife is being raped over and over again by men twice her own age? Being forced to take a man's dick in every hole and then some? He pushed the man back and let him go. Your child's life hangs upon your next decision, old man. You'd better make the right choice. The man took his pen and, with tears in his eyes, signed it and then stamped his seal of approval on it. Good choice, Mr. Sabaki. Have a pleasant afternoon, Naruto said with a sly smile. Bastard, he glared at the blonde. Naruto put it in his coat pocket and laughed. Sticks and stones, old man. Oh, and if you try and report anything that just happened to your lord or try to tell any other village leader about this, I won't sell your little Suki into slavery. I'll have her tortured and killed. End of flashback. He simply didn't want to deal with her, not because he was afraid of her. In addition to being an unforeseen issue, he had anticipated seeing another girl later. One who had attempted to wed him in order to embezzle all of his wealth. The bitch who digs for gold. Oh Cammy, did you hear? Hear what? Someone was murdered in that brothel on Fun Avenue. Then that abandoned apartment building was burnt to the ground. Yugao heard this while strolling down the street. Everyone was talking about something that happened while she was away. As the town's civilian police force taped off the area and questioned the witnesses, she hurried to the scene and joined a crowd of onlookers. Two others were carrying a screecher with a covered body on it, and the white sheet they were using to conceal it turned a deep crimson. She tried to hear the witnesses making a statement by focusing her hearing. I was serving drinks, Jay. Just like any other day. Then these people in masks walked in. They didn't even bother anyone else, they just went up to him and everyone turned to watch the two people carrying the victim after there was a shriek. One of them had stumbled and dropped his end, causing the body to roll out and land on the ground. It was Shinha, and he appeared to have been mauled by a group of untamed animals. Yugao even covered her mouth in disbelief. His entire face was slashed, his neck and chest were sliced open, and it appeared that the spin was the only thing keeping his head in place. He appeared to have attempted self-defense based on the appearance of his hands and arms, but his assailants continued to stab and hack at him. Some of his fingers were even missing. The worst thing, though, was that his face was contorted in agony. It appeared as though he was still in pain despite having passed away. To get him back to their station, the two hurried to cover him and load him onto the little transport. Yugao was shocked to learn that he had been killed and that she might have also been harmed if she had been present. Now, however, her only lead was, pardon the morbid pun, a dead end. In the location of the Kurabara clan compound, Yayoi sat beneath a small tent. It was more of a shelter from the sun and rain than a camping tent. She had just received a letter from Naruto at the hotel from one of her guards, telling her that he was granting her access to the clan trust fund, which was a separate account from the primary accounts they used to finance projects. All heads typically had access to the trust fund, but they needed the chairman's permission to take money out or charge more than they were permitted to. Even though it wasn't necessary yet, she was happy that he had taken the initiative because if he wasn't in town when they needed to begin developing the land, they wouldn't want to wait for him to come back. As the workers and even some genin worked to cut down the trees and then dig up the stumps, she sipped her tea in her seat with her personal advisor sitting next to her and a guard keeping watch behind her. One sizable traditional clan home with a sizable front yard for ceremonies was to be the compound's main feature. Her advisor calculated that the total cost, including the necessary supplies and construction, would be approximately 62,591,250 yen. The clan's funds would be slightly impacted, but they would make up the difference with their business. After all, their trust fund was an account that held a cool 1 billion yen, which would be refilled until it reached its maximum. The remaining funds would then be invested in other accounts across the country, where they would accrue interest. Since they ran their own businesses and earned their own money, each head could only take out about 800,000 at a time and only with a valid reason. Furthermore, all of the money they took had to be returned later because it was officially the company's funds and, therefore, the Lord Chairman's. The land and building rights had already been acquired by them. Teams would be building all day long with the money they were paying in the hopes that they would be prepared for the meeting. Although she was aware that Naruto was not anticipating it, it would have been a fantastic surprise for him. Not really, but Naruto gave her a set of plans to follow in the letter. He explained that it would be like the others, with 3 floors. A dojo and common area for regular events like parties and fundraisers on the first floor, rooms for them to sleep and rest in on the second, and a meeting room for the chairman and the 8 heads on the third, where the heads of each family would gather and discuss any matters they needed to. Hey Yayoi. Chan, with a twitching eye, Yayoi said, Guro, what an unpleasant surprise. Oh Yayoi, why are you so mad at me? Guro said, acting hurt. As she sipped her tea, she asked herself, do I really need to say? Yeah, I guess not, Guro said, scratching his chin. What do you want, Guro? I'm busy here. Guro stepped back, making sure he was well out of reach in case she tried to stab him. Well, I just wanted to know what happened between you and the chairman, he said. Yayoi turned to him and said, I don't see how it's any of your business, but knowing you, you'll pester me until I tell you. So how about I save us both the time? When my husband died, I was very depressed. After avenging him, I started drinking heavily because of my grief. My husband was dead. My son hates me. I was close to killing myself. But Lord Chairman stepped in and forced me to stop drinking. Yayoi paused to make herself some more tea. One thing led to another and we ended up sleeping together. Then when my son refused to take his father's place, he asked me to take up the title. Nothing more, nothing less. If he was anyone else, I would be appalled that I invited another man into my bed so soon after my late husband's death, but if not for him we would have never been what we were. I see. Well, what about? Guro said, nodding. Finish that question and I'll stab you, Yayoi scowled. With a tense laugh, the man stepped back and said, have a nice day, Yayoi. Chan, before leaving before she could hurt him. Yayoi suppressed a hiss at him because it wasn't appropriate for a woman of her caliber. How dare he approach her and make such a question? However, she told him anyhow. When Guro wanted to know something, he had a way of getting under someone's skin and persistently asking until they gave in and told. She was so ashamed of herself that, although she was still grieving and loving her husband, she only gave him a brief summary of the entire story. Something blossomed inside her as a result of the way he held and cared for her. To be honest, he was incredibly kind, considerate, and understanding. It was she who approached him. Her inability to control herself was exacerbated by the fact that she was twice his age. She was just another woman who was seduced by a blonde crime lord, as much as she hated to admit it. One day he might be seen threatening someone's life, and the next day he would kiss you and tell you how special you were. She wasn't sure why she was drawn to the younger man. Perhaps it was some innate desire to be with a domineer who could provide for her and protect her, or perhaps it was the possibility of danger that made her feel alive. However, after all, who would want a woman her age with a son who hated her? Lord Chairman would never marry her. Even so, the son was older than the blonde. Yayoi let out a sorrowful sigh into her tea, making sure no one could see. If only she had been younger. How could she be acting this way? She shook her head. For Kami's sake, she was the head of the Dojima family, not just a sick schoolgirl. The sound of knocking a half-empty bottle of wine spilled on the hardwood floor, knocking over another empty bottle as Naruto, who had fallen asleep, sat up quickly. He moaned, son of a bitch, as he picked it up before the rest could fall out. The sound of knocking. Damn it, I'm coming. The sound of knocking. What? He exclaimed as he stomped to the door and slung it open, the handle denting into the wall and the metal doorstop slamming through the door with the force. The wall now had spider web cracks along it on both sides of the door frame, but the Anbu on the other side did not move to indicate that he was afraid. He said, Uzumaki Naruto. No, the Kami damn Easter bunny. Don't you see my big motherfucking ears and the cotton ball tail over my ass? Naruto, who was already half drunk, looked at him blankly. Ignoring him, the Anbu pushed a piece of paper in his face and said, the Honorable Council Urbi demand your presence. You have 2 hours to prepare. With most of the signs of intoxication gone, Naruto growled and slapped his hand and the paper away from his face. You do well to get your hand out of my face, he said, and what if I refuse? Then we will place you under arrest and force you. Naruto laughed. In that kai you and your masters can suck my dick. I know the law better than the law itself. I am no more a member of this village than you are of Iwa, so I don't fall under your command unless I commit a major crime. If you wish to do business in this village, you will do as your betters say. I always follow my superior's instructions, but Kami-sama hasn't spoken to me yet. Naruto sneered at the Anbu. The paper was taken away. Now go back and bow between your master's legs. I can tell that you don't follow the orders of the Hokage, so tell your true lord that the chairman of Black Rose says that if he has any business with me that he can request to speak with me face to face and keep his dogs on a leash." Before the Anbu could speak, the door slammed. Naruto returned to his suite and frowned as he studied the summons paper. He hated village councils because they were all so conceited and treated themselves like gods, believing they were gifts to the world. The 8 family heads were the Kurabara clan council, to be sure, but they were also Yakuza bosses under him, and they actually controlled their territories in the same way that he did. He required the heads, in contrast to Konoha, which the Hokage could easily rule. There were other Yakuza clans besides the Kurabara clan, and if someone ever tried to start a conflict with them, he trusted them to handle it, or, if they couldn't, to warn him so they could assist. Although a war was unlikely, their principal adversary was the Omi alliance, led by an elderly man who reminded him of Sarutobi and who preferred peace to conflict. Despite the man's son pressuring him to exterminate the Kurabara, there were hardly any disputes between the two clans. Naruto himself went to their headquarters and negotiated a settlement before the situation could worsen. Making any kind of agreement was a little difficult, particularly when Naruto was by himself and the Omi had all of the family bosses seated across from him, determined to prevent any more rivalry from emerging against them. With the ability to speak in a silver tongue, however, Naruto was able to persuade some people to agree to his terms. He then threatened them by revealing some of the demon's crimson aura and declaring that he was not afraid of war. They agreed on territory because the Omi knew they couldn't control everything and this young man wasn't playing games. Since Osamu was always a good politician and would frequently rip councils apart when they tried something by breaking the law or using any other dishonest methods, he was getting off topic, and there was no way in hell that he was going to deal with the council at this time. Since his brand of politics frequently involved beatings, threats, and occasionally having to conceal a body, he would also need to send him a brief note in addition to this summons letter. Osamu proceeded down the street in the direction of the Hokage Tower, where the council meets in a room below ground that is sealed off from anyone trying to listen in. He was astounded that the Hokage permitted civilians to enter and exit his tower, regardless of whether they were council members or not, but it was a recipe for trouble to let a group of idiots into the place where the most powerful man worked and the village's secrets were kept. Anyone not invited or a member of the clan was strictly prohibited from entering their clan compound. Even so, lower-ranking soldiers needed to be invited in by their family head or escorted in by their captain. Furthermore, they frequently met there to discuss even the smallest issues. Unless there was an emergency, such as an approaching war or alliance, or an official meeting, they never used the meeting room on the top floor, etc. Wearing a navy blue business suit, he displayed the Fuma clan emblem on his lapel. 2 bodyguards followed him. He had read the summons and had just received that note from the chairman. They were allegedly accusing them of not paying village taxes, operating their businesses without permits, and constructing illegally on village property. They would never have openly assisted the chairman if they had known that the Hokage was the one who did it. However, this would benefit them. Prior to becoming the head, he was the family's top lawyer, so he was familiar with the laws of most nations. As a precaution, he had even studied Konoha laws before coming here, and today would prove to be beneficial. What sort of lawyer would he be if he didn't take advantage of Konoha's law, which would make them regret this farce? Naruto sat reading a newspaper in the hotel lobby. After a short while, he became aware of how depressing it was that he had been hiding in his hotel room while continuing to drink. He decided he wasn't going back up, so he went downstairs and gave the note to Osamu to one of the guys he had hanging around the lobby. If he met Suki, or Kami forbade the other girl, he would simply confront them and reprimand them. However, there was little chance of seeing either of them because Konoha was a big place and he still had some tricks from his academy days if he needed them. Although it wasn't much, he was still familiar with the fundamental jutsu taught in the ninja academy, as well as the shadow clone jutsu he had learned on his own through trial and error and from the forbidden scroll he had stolen before leaving. "Hey Gaki, pervert," the blonde's eye twitched. "I never could understand why hotels put these couches in their lobbies," he said, shifting on the rigid cushion as Jiraiya passed him and took the seat across from him. "It's to go the extra mile for the comfort of their guests," Naruto said as he turned the page. "Comfortable my ass," the pervert snorted as he tried to calm himself. "I know you're not here just to say hello. You are a busy man after all." Naruto interrupted the man to ask, "Why are you here?" "I need some information from you," Jiraiya sighed, alluding to what the blonde had told him following their training. "I must say that you might just be the first to ask me for information and so boldly too. What makes you think that I'm an information dealer?" Naruto said, closing the paper. "Some people ask for a cup of sugar, some ask to borrow money." He laughed a little. Jiraiya grinned slightly. "I have my sources, one of which told me about a spy network known as the Raiko.Ken. Tuki said that they'd have the information they didn't. Naruto cocked his head to the side and asked, and did you find this group? With his own little smug smile, Jiraiya told the blonde, the Raiko.Ken. Tuki, or the intelligence and statistics are, in fact, not a group of spies. Sadly no, even with my massive spy network I never could find them. But I did find out one thing, he said, shaking his head with a frown. Really? And what are they? Naruto asked, staring him in the eye with a sardonic expression that turned as cold as ice. The individual was made more dangerous. You should know Gaki, they're your information department, a branch of your company dedicated to information gathering, mostly for what I said before, but in fact, they dig up information and dirty little secrets. Bravo Jiraiya, you are the first person ever to make that connection, Naruto said with a great clap. Tell me, how on earth did you find that out? He asked. It wasn't easy. Anything I got on them was that they were just a normal group of workers trying to find ways to improve your corporation, he said. In truth, it was a complete accident that I found out. I was in this gambling joint meeting a contact of mine. I was going to ask him about this group of spies that no one knew about. But he was late, so I decided to play a game. Asked a guy in there who looked older than me if he wanted to play, and he asked me the stakes. Being the polite guy, the first was I told him that it was his call. Jiraiya looked at Naruto bewildered as he interrupted, and he gave you some outrageous rate. I know exactly who you talking about. Bald head, around 5 feet tall, 2 front teeth make him look like a rat, Jiraiya said. Jiraiya gave a nod. Aizawa the rat, Naruto uttered with his arms folded, is the most deceitful son of a whore you will ever encounter. His language caused some of the people in the vicinity to look at him disapprovingly. You two know each other? Jiraiya silently questioned. Naruto sighed. Know him? He used to work for me. Caught the prick trying to steal company information to sell. The brunette sighed. He's lucky that he didn't get sent to prison. Even had a gall to laugh when he was acquitted in court due to lack of solid evidence. So what did you do then? Asked the man, who nodded and understood the sense of betrayal. The brunette laughed. The one thing no one could stop us from doing, we fired him, had him blacklisted, then drained his company bank account, before kicking him out into the streets. That would explain why he smelled and looked dirty. He sighed. I don't care. What I do care about is the fact that you know about this. Such information could cause untold problems. What is it that you need to know that would make you go through all the trouble? He paused and leaned forward, saying, I need information on 2 things, the first being a secret organization known as the Akatsuki. Harming, Naruto said, and what else? I just heard that there was a murder in a town not too far away, as well as an arson that burned down an abandoned building with some people inside. My own network has told me that they were the main drug dealers in their town and that both are connected. I need to know why and if the town is facing a possible drug war. Well Jiraiya, it'll take some time, but I'm sure I could find out for you. Great, so when can I expect it? The pervert said as he got to his feet. Scowled. You can expect it after you pay for it. I'm sure you know that information isn't cheap, and just because you uncovered my own network's existence doesn't mean that it now belongs to you. The price for information on the murder and arson will cost you 15,000 yen, and only because you are training me. So what will it cost for the info on them? Jiraiya couldn't complain because it wasn't too high, and it was definitely a discount from what it could have been. Free of charge, said Naruto, grinning and leaning back. He blinked. Don't give me that look, I'm no fool. I know good and well that they are going to come after me sometime because of what I hold inside me. The brunette replied with his arms crossed and his gaze. I've known for a while. And I know that I wouldn't stand a chance against them, so I've been working on a small insurance policy in case they ever do come after me in the open. Jiraiya opened her mouth to speak. I'll see you later, perv. I'll have the information in a day or 2 and then you can train me some more. Yeah. I'll see you later, Gaki. Just as the door was about to close, Naruto waved him away, and Guro entered. Guro approached and asked, Yo Ruto. Chan, who was the dude with the snow-white hair. That, my friend, was one Jiraiya the super pervert, better known as the last true Sannin, Naruto said without even glancing at him. Oh yeah. I heard of him, mostly about how he gets beat up by pissed-off girls for peeking in on them, Guro said, nodding and straightening his snakeskin jacket. Hell hath no fury like a woman catching a man peeping in on her, Naruto thought. But all jokes aside, he knows about the spy network we set up. He came to ask for information, and the way he seemed to act about it was like he was thinking of blackmailing me. Should we? You know? Naruto nodded his head. No, he is paying me for it, and besides, if he tries I'll just expose a number of his own spies, he replied dismissively, but you can go after Aizawa. He has broken contract with us about keeping certain information to himself, but make sure it won't be traced to us. All right, Ruto. Chan, I have the perfect person for the job, the man said, nodding. Yeah. Whatever, Naruto said, nodding. Ah, what's wrong, Ruto-chan, bored? Guro said, twisting his head to the side. At this point, having crabs would be an improvement. Well, I found this gym down the road. It has a boxing ring we could use, the one-eyed man said with a laugh. What, no more street fighting? Guro laughed. Like hell I'm doing that again. Last time you beat me over the head with a folding chair. Flashback, people were screaming, things were breaking, and the racket was unbelievable. The noise around the bar was deafening. All of this was coming from a bar, and people were swarming to try and catch a glimpse of the fight before it ended by peering through open doors and windows. Those near the window abruptly fled as a man was flung outside, breaking the glass as he rolled into the street, the shards tearing up his bare chest and back. That all you got, Ruto? He screamed toward the bar as he clambered to his feet. Cuz I'm not out yet, here I come. Guro laughed hysterically before he hurried back through the window. He was swatted like a fly by a metal chair that came forward in mid-jump, striking him in the face and sending him back out into the street with his eyes crossed. With a bloody smirk and a busted lower lip, Naruto climbed through the broken window while carrying a dented folding chair. Had enough, Guro? He asked. Never, he exclaimed, only to groan as Naruto hurled the chair at him, striking him once more in the head. How about now? Guro remained silent and merely twitched as the perspiration of the onlookers around him fell. End of flashback. Good point. Well then, lead the way, Naruto said, nodding. Osamu exuded confidence as he stood in front of the council. The council was seated in a half circle in front of him, with the Hokage in the center and civilians on the left and ninja on the right. The elderly man didn't appear happy to be there either, but he had to be there or else the village's foolishness would send them to hell and back. Otherwise, Danzo the War Hawk would have them engaged in combat with every other village in the area. Homura stood up from his seat alongside the civilians and said, "We call this meeting to order and demand to know why not one, but 3 places in our village have been closed off and are now being worked on by foreign construction workers." A civilian interrupted Sarutobi as he started to say, "Not only that, but who are you? We demanded that boy be brought here, you are not him, so you shouldn't be here, and as such, we should seize his assets and use them for the good of the village." With a loud laugh, Osamu caught everyone's attention. The same man insisted, "What's so funny, you are?" Osamu replied with a wry grin. "It just tickles me to see a group of hypocritical civilian council members who don't even know their village laws. As such, I demand on behalf of Lord Chairman and the Black Rose, an official public apology along with the standard sum of 100,000 yen be paid to us for violation of our rights as visitors and businessmen within your village." A woman with pink hair got up and asked, "What are you going on about?" Hyuga Hiyashi came to light. "Lord Hokage, I must agree with the Black Rose representative. I know exactly which law he speaks of and to ignore it will cost us dearly." The woman screamed, angry at being disregarded. "What law?" Osamu took out a small book from his coat pocket. "Konoha laws. Village law pertaining to the rights of businesses state that the private property and assets cannot be taken away and used by the village unless there is unrefutable proof that said person or persons have broken a major law such as aiding in an invasion. Even then the case must be tried by the Fire Lord, and to even threaten a person or business is in itself a violation of national law. Offending party must issue an official public apology and pay the offended party the sum of 100,000 yen unless said party feels that they were greatly wronged, in which they can send the appropriate plea to the Supreme Courts of Fire Country to hear the case." Sarutobi nodded. During his tenure as Hokage, he had assisted his own sensei, the second Hokage, in writing and passing that law. Because some people were stealing traders' property to use for the war, the aforementioned law was necessary, which made other merchants shy away from visiting Leaf. They were going through a very difficult period, with prices soaring and people gradually going hungry, but after that law was passed, the traders who had their belongings taken were reimbursed, and things quickly returned to normal. Since almost every civilian member had been hanged, the Ninja Council became the primary council for the remainder of the war. Almost all of the people who ordered it were charged with the crime and publicly executed in the middle of town. "I agree," he said. "The ones responsible for this waste of time are hereby ordered to pay the requested sum. I personally issued the chairman of Black Rose the deeds to those 3 properties as well as the permits needed to build and operate on those lands," he said, glaring at the civilian council, already aware of the cause. Unaware that the Hokage had already personally cared for them, the civilian council was shocked by the revelation and assumed they would just follow orders. However, their strategy was now ruined, and any further actions would be viewed with suspicion. "Well, this was a complete waste of my afternoon," Osamu said, clapping his hands together. "Now, if any of you have any other business concerning the corporation or Lord Chairman, I urge you to think about it, because you're not the first to try and pull a travesty such as this." a pitiful attempt at a hostile merger. He paused, looked around at everyone, and then nodded to Sarutobi and the Ninja Council. "Now I hope you all have a wonderful evening, ladies and gentlemen," he said. "Oh, and one last thing," the lawyer said, pausing and turning his head. "If any of you try some underhanded tactic to get back at us, just remember, the roots that made Black Rose bloom into what it is now stretch far and wide. It would be terrible for you to lose a trade agreement over something like this." Since no one had responded, he turned on his heel and headed for the door. After allowing the thought to sink in, he grinned and said, "Just food for thought," before leaving the council stunned and entering the room. As they walked around the ring, a bare-chested Guro laughed and said, "Come on, Naruto-chan, don't tell me you're getting rusty." "Remind me, what was our score again?" smirked Naruto. The older man's smile vanished as he scowled and swung at the blonde, who sidestepped it and gave him a side punch. Guro recoiled and rubbed the spot where the blonde struck his kidney, saying, "Ah, ya hit my kidney," with a wince. "Oh, quit being a pussy," Naruto said with a laugh while hopping from foot to foot. The majority of the people there were merely trying to stay in shape and working out, because no one even looked at them, usually only a quick glance out of curiosity. Sparring in the ring had to be a common occurrence. They both had bandages wrapped around their hands and were only wearing their pants. They could have worn boxing gloves, but they wanted to injure each other more than the gloves would have permitted because, after all, what's the fun of fighting if you can hardly feel it? A black, shadowy dragon with ominous red eyes, encircled by gray clouds and a pale moon by his right shoulder, was also tattooed on Naruto's back, just like Guro. Naruto, however, had a swimmer's body with much more defined muscles than Guro, who had a slimmer frame. Naruto saw this as more canvas for more ink. The clan crest, a black vintage rose with the kanji for loyalty at the top, wealth on the right, power on the left, and respect on the bottom, was tattooed on the right side of his chest. In addition, he had the outline of what was once Whirlpool Country and the ancient Uzumaki clan emblem inked on his shoulder. His method of honoring his late mother's land, where she had died while giving birth to him. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted when he was struck in the face by a fist because he allowed his mind to wander. The blonde said, "Oh, sucker punch," as he rubbed his cheek. With his fist cocked back, Guro smirked and said, "Oh, quit being such a pussy," before leaping towards his boss. The two of them flew over the ropes and onto the ground below as Naruto ran towards him and tackled him in mid-leap. Both groaned and stood up. "Okay," the older man said, squirming, getting to his feet and massaging his eye patch that had fallen off in the fall. "I think this is a draw." Thunk. Guro twitched and fell to the ground. "They keep these things under the ring," Naruto said, holding a folding chair behind him. "That's twice I knocked your ass out with a chair," he said, grinning. Guro then groaned slightly in pain as he dropped the chair on top of him. "Oh, quit being such a pussy and suck it up." After 2 days, nothing had happened except that Naruto's sea-themed restaurant, Atlantis, was almost ready to open. Waiting for the head chef to arrive and beginning the hiring of waiters and waitresses was really all that was required. His other location was also almost finished. The Hyuga, in particular, had already contacted Osamu about being permitted to use the entire space for their tea ceremonies, and the large traditional tea house beneath the monument was already creating a lot of buzz among the clans. It was in the same predicament as the other location. They were merely awaiting the arrival of the clansmen to secure the area and hire all the necessary personnel. Actually, Naruto had already begun the interview process at the tea house by placing an advertisement in the newspaper seeking women to work as waitresses. To his astonishment, the number of applicants was startling. The line stretched down the street and around the corner, with girls from 13 to 40 years old waiting at the door. He had to send Nishki alone to oversee the tea shipment with the genin team and their sensei because there were so many. In order to avoid giving one of those women the opportunity to claim that he tried anything on them because they weren't hired, he enlisted Yayoi to assist with the interviews since he didn't have a partner. In the past, many men had endured this practice. The woman seated beside him called out, "Next," as she saw the young woman, a civilian girl who wished to work there part-time after school, leave. A girl who was only a few years older than Naruto entered the tea house after one of Yayoi's soldiers held the door open. After spending hours sitting on the pillow behind the low table, Naruto buried his face in his hands and muttered, "Name?" "Ichiraku Ayame," the girl said, clearing her throat and speaking in a slightly apprehensive tone. "Ayame?" Naruto asked, raising his head and looking directly into the girl's face. The girl gasped as she looked at him. "Naruto-kun." They simultaneously questioned one another, "What are you doing here?" Yayoi asked, "Lord Chairman, do you know this young lady?" as she glanced between the two. Naruto turned to face Yayoi and said, She's one of the few people who treated me like a human, before getting up and embracing the girl. Cammy, it's been forever, he said. I know. Just look at you. You're taller than me and I'm older than you, said the brunette in return for the embrace. Things change. Speaking of which, why are you here? Don't get me wrong, but don't you work at the ramen stand with your dad? Naruto said, breaking the embrace and grinning slightly. Ayame replied, yeah, but dad hired 2 other boys to help out and I don't work as much. I was planning on quitting after I found a better job. Does the old man know? Naruto asked, returning to his pillow, seat and gesturing for Ayame to follow suit. She replied, yeah, and he understands. Those 2 guys he hired might be clumsy and, well, dim. But they work hard, harder than me since I've started going back to school. For what? Ayame was blushing. Well, I've been taking classes on art. But that's really just a hobby. What I really want to do is, well, be a model. Naruto allowed the pictures to flash through his mind. The idea of the girl modeling for him excited him because he had a slight crush on her as a child. Just a little. Before doing something nefarious, he shook his head in his mind to try to get rid of the pictures. Well, I know you've had experience as a waitress, he said, turning to face Yayoi. You got anything to ask? He asked. How is your public speaking? Yayoi asked, nodding. Ayame appeared to be thinking, pretty good. I couldn't go out and give a speech to the whole village, but I'm not afraid to be in front of an audience. Wonderful. Now, do you think that you could keep yourself in check under pressure? Ayame replied, you couldn't serve as a ramen chef if you couldn't. Yayoi responded with a nod. One last thing. How do you feel about dressing up and wearing a lot of make-up that takes nearly 2 hours to put on? I'd say that it'd be the same as any other day, the smirking girl with the brown hair said. Yayoi and Naruto exchanged smirking glances. You're hired, the blonde said, nodding to the older woman who was observing Ayame. Great, when do I start? Ayame asked with a radiant smile. You start now, Madam Ayame, Naruto said, patting the pillow next to him. Madam? She asked, blinking. Smiled. Yes, you are now the manager of this branch. It is only fair that you have a say in who works under you here at the Black Rose Tea House. B. But wouldn't that interfere with my studies? She asked, gaping, unwilling to jeopardize her dream or her career. Of course not. As manager you don't have to be around all the time, and I'd rather it be you because of how you treated me when I was young, Naruto said, shaking his head and laughing. Almost believing it was a dream, Ayame shifted to sit beside Naruto. It was too good to be true. Not only was she landing a job at this place, but she was also handling it. Next, Yayoi said, turning to face the door. Nishiki's mind was terrified to death as he lay in a fetal position in the cart. His nightmares would always be plagued by the terrible scene he had just witnessed. The dreadful green creatures, their youthful cries. I told you not to do that, guy. Sensei, said a young woman beside him, her hair in 2 buns, as she gave him a sorrowful look. Lee yelled, but 10-10, we are in the prime of our youth. Nishki shivered once more while muttering about living eyebrows and spandex. Everything was a blur to Yugao. The only thing she remembered was getting a letter from Jin, the man she had been working with outside of the brothel. He had been begging her to meet him behind the brothel as soon as possible in the letter. She rushed to the brothel where Shinha had been killed and entered the alleyway behind it, where she discovered Jin smoking a joint while leaning against the wall, utterly shocked that he was still alive. After he apologized, she felt a hard object strike the back of her head, knocking her unconscious before she could hit the floor. Had they discovered her? Were they aware that she was a spy? It was difficult to see her because her hands and feet were tied, and she had a bag over her head. She sensed that she was being pulled along the floor, her shoes slipping on the floor. They were taking her where? Would they subject her to torture? Take her by rape? Being apprehended and taken prisoner by the enemy was the worst thing that could happen to a spy. They paused just long enough to open a soft door, most likely leading to the room where they would subject her to a variety of unimaginable abuses. She was about to fight them off when she felt them sit her in a chair and untie her hands and feet, but the bag was torn from her face, indicating that she was not in a torture chamber or a grotesque room filled with sex toys where they would play with her for hours on end and indulge their sick fantasies. She was seated across from a well-known man at a table in a small restaurant. Ah, we meet again. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Taigga. Just Taigga. Yugao said, looking around bewildered. Ah, I'm Yugao Yu. Taigga replied, well, Ms. Yu, forgive my men, but knocking you out was for the best. No doubt you were on guard because of the death of Shinha and his boys. You probably thought that you were also targeted. Ah. Yeah, Taigga believed it. Well, you're not. Someone has taken interest in you, Ms. Yu, and so you were taken off of the hit list. For some reason you caught my boss's eye and he asked me to offer you some work. What kind of work? Inquired Yugao. Taigga laughed. Shenhe was a small fry, the lowest of the low. He had you doing common chores like pulling off hits. I'm sure you noticed that Jin was much better at supplying you with jobs. The man paused and took out a photograph of a man in a police uniform who appeared to be in his 30s. This is your test. Track him down and kill him. He's a corrupt police officer who has been hiding cases for a long time, most of which have involved rape and molestation. If you can help us rid the streets of this trash and show that you are a strong person, we might be able to accept you into our family. Speaking to the two women, Naruto sighed from his seat at the table and said, finally, I thought it'd never get late. After spending hours interviewing all the young and old girls who were interested in working there, they eventually finished late at night. I think I'm going back to my hotel to rest, Yayoi said, stifling a yawn as she stood up and adjusted the katana by her side before straightening her kimono. I feel like I could just fall asleep right here, Ayame said, yawning. Come on girls, Naruto said with a laugh, I'll walk you both home. Hold on, I just need to do something right quick, said Yayoi as the blonde led them outside. With two of her guards waiting by the door, she turned and walked back towards the tea house, saying, lock the place up, we won't be returning tonight. They said in a bow, yes, right away miss. When she heard a loud scream, she turned to walk back to Naruto. Running towards it, a feat for her because she was wearing a kimono. She was horrified to see a man dressed entirely in black stab Naruto in the stomach. Lord Chairman. With a scream, she rushed forward and pulled out her own blade. When he saw her approaching, the man reached for the blonde's stomach with his sword, but Naruto grabbed his arm and wouldn't let go. With her sword singing as it cut through the air and killed the assassins, Yayoi arrived at them quickly. The ground and even a few windows were covered in a stunning crimson spray. It happened so quickly that those who had been on the street before hardly saw it all come to an end, and soon the roads were crowded with yelling citizens. The assassin's neck was sliced open like a Pez dispenser as he fell limp to the ground. With the man's sword still lodged in his stomach, all the way down to the hilt, Naruto also collapsed to his knees. He grasped at the handle and sagged just as Yayoi caught him and held his head against her chest. Everything appeared to flow together, and he could see her yelling face with his wide blue eyes. He knew she was yelling at him, but there was silence. After avoiding the first two, he was forced to defend Ayame when he saw her begin to scream, so he shoved her, sending her reeling back and providing the assassin with the ideal opportunity to strike. The attack had been unexpected. Just as Yayoi turned a corner, the man had struck, screaming about retaliation while stabbing at his face with a short katana. After coughing up some blood and feeling himself lifted up, he closed his eyes, let himself go, and soon felt nothing at all. Yayoi's face was gone, and he felt a strange warmth and the strangest sense of calmness. There was a general feeling of calm before the storm in the village, and many people were afraid that another rival village, such as Iwa, would attack, but their fears were unjustified. The doctors said that Naruto was very fortunate to be alive and that the blade they had taken out was soaked in poison that would have killed a lesser man, but that he was unresponsive and in a coma. Like state. Sarutobi sat in his office, forgetting his paperwork, and lit his pipe to calm himself. He had just returned from the hospital after finding out what had happened to the blonde and had been worried ever since. When he arrived, he was certain that if he had shown any animosity toward Naruto, not that he would, but that all four of them would have fought against him, regardless of whether he was the Hokage or not. His bodyguards were stationed in the lobby, by the elevators, and along the hallway leading to Naruto's room. The woman had sat at his bedside the entire time, and the three men wore serious, angry expressions as they sat in the room with the chairman. When the doctors and nurses asked him to get the group to leave, he saw the big man, Futoshi, get angry and threatened to throw the nurse through the window on the third floor. The man who had conducted the council meeting, Osamu, took the time to inform them that they would not be departing and that they had already erred in relying on the village to protect them. Although he couldn't really do anything to force them to leave without creating trouble, the Hokage accepted their justifications and agreed to let them stay. The blade had pierced through the left side of Naruto's stomach, breaking the bottom ribs, then sliced through his large and small intestines before poking out his back, just missing the spine. He sat with them and listened to the doctor explain the extent of the damage. They were all hiding something, he knew that much, and the way they looked at each other when he asked and the way she said she didn't know just confirmed it. The woman who had been with Naruto the entire time had only spoken to him once, when he asked if she knew who had done this to Naruto. Even though the village was in danger, he couldn't risk losing alliances with trading nations because they already had shaky agreements with Suna, and it was stressful enough to deal with that. As much as he wanted to know and be able to help, he couldn't get involved or force them to tell. The chemicals in the tobacco helped him relax as he blew out the smoke after taking a deep drag from his pipe. How did this come to pass? Futoshi questioned lowly, his fist clenching until the knuckles turned white. The large bald man sat in the chair across from the foot of the bed and gazed back and forth between the blonde and the floor. The Akito Senran ended years ago. As he gazed out his window at the streets below, Osamu sighed and said, "The war did end, but it would seem that someone didn't want to let it go, especially after what happened to end it." As they sat there, they reflected on the Shadow Wars, the clandestine conflict that erupted between the Yakuza families. Yayoi pronounced, "I know that uniform, but it's not possible," from Naruto's bedside. The Wano Seiwa Kai were totally destroyed. Guro nodded and leaned on the wall next to the door, whispering, "We saw to that personally." Futoshi sighed, "I saw we hunt them down and kill the people who sent that assassin." "No. You won't?" The sudden voice startled them all, and as they turned to face the bed, they noticed Naruto breathing heavily and with his eyes open. "Thank Kami you're awake," Yayoi exclaimed with relief, "Lord Chairman." Disregarding her, he turned to face Futoshi before hissing in pain from his muscles moving too much, which caused Yayoi to press the button that raised the mattress. He muttered, "Thank you Yayoi," and then turned to face the man on the other side of his bed. "You will do no such thing," he said. "But," the blonde yelled, squinting a little later, "but nothing, we have nothing to worry about from the Seiwa Kai, trust me," she said. Osamu questioned, "How can you be sure?" Naruto glanced at Guro. "Because Guro, Sohei, and I did the job personally," he said as he relaxed and leaned back. "I'm not proud of it, but the complete destruction of the family brought a sudden end to the war. No one knew who exactly to point the finger to at the time and everyone was scared. Any evidence was destroyed when we blew the place up or burned in the resulting fire." Not knowing the whole story, the three others listened carefully. "As you all know, we used the resulting fear to permanently end the war. Our clan was officially recognized by the other smaller families and clans. Then territories were drawn up and each fraction took their own little piece depending of their size. The Omi Alliance also gave us part of Demon Country as a sign of respect and to show that there was no hard feelings, but in truth they had lost a lot of their own clan and were afraid that we were still angry at them, as they had a hand in starting it all. It's all in the past though, I know exactly who ordered the attack, and she will die for it soon enough," he said, pausing and closing his eyes. With a startled expression, Guro asked, "You don't mean?" "Yes, it was her, the only person I let live," Naruto said with a nod. Futoshi interrupted, "So there was a survivor," and asked, "Why did you let her live?" Naruto was staring at the ceiling. "I couldn't. No matter how hard I tried my body wouldn't move. I had just killed her mother and father right in front of her but I just couldn't bring myself to slit the girl's throat. Maybe. Just maybe it was because of her mother pleading for me to let her daughter live." "So the girl lived," Guro complained, glancing at the ground below. "Yes. And now she's taken over the remnants of her father's clan, the ones we missed," said Naruto. The blonde was awake when the door opened and a nurse poked her head through to see how they were doing. "Oh, you're up, hold on and I'll get the doctor." "You have no idea who attacked me. If you have to, tell them that it was a hit from one of the village's enemies, that they didn't want us to start supporting the village at all," Naruto said as he watched her close the door and turn to face them. They nodded right before a doctor entered, fussing over him sitting up and possibly putting too much pressure on his wound. The blonde relaxed as instructed and allowed the nurse to pull back the sheet. Because of the wound, he was unable to wear the typical paper-like dress that they required people to wear because it would interfere with their work. Instead, they dressed him in a pair of pants, leaving his bandaged chest exposed. Osamu and Futoshi said goodbye to him and went to assist with his belongings while he was in the hospital, having only stayed because they were concerned, while she worked under Yayoi's watchful eye. The doctor tried his best to ignore Guro, who was leaning on the wall next to him, and remarked, "You're a very fortunate man," as he washed his hands in the sink by the door. "The sword we removed from you just barely missed you spin." The nurse made a small apology with her mouth as she pulled on the bandage that was stuck because of some dry blood, and Naruto winced. Just as the older man approached and put on glasses before examining the sutured wound, the bloody gauze was pulled away and thrown in the trash. He touched the stitches and said, "You seem to be healing much faster than expected," after a minute. "Where the fuck did you get your training? You don't poke at someone's wound, you fucker," baring his teeth in rage, Naruto yelled, "Son of a bitch." In an attempt to avoid looking embarrassed, the doctor jerked back, "Ah, yes," and cleared his throat before saying, "You're healing quite well, you should be able to leave after a few days. Nurse, would you please rewrap his bandage?" She ignored the glare Naruto sent over her shoulder as the doctor left the room, nodded, and went to work. The life of Anko Mitarashi was simple, or easy by her standards. Around 10 in the morning, she got up, showered, and dressed before heading to the dango stand in time to see the first batch of dango emerge. She then went to work at the Torture and Investigation Department, where she was free to arrive a little later if she so desired and was never really required to adhere to a strict schedule. She got away with it because Ibiki, one of the few men she was friends with, was her superior. Usually, she did this by bribing him with a stick of dango, a little joke she had told him the first time she was late. However, Ibiki instructed her to report to the Hokage when she arrived today, on time of all. She offered him the last dango because she initially believed it to be a joke, but when he accepted it and informed her that she still needed to report to him, she understood he wasn't kidding. He did so as infrequently as possible. So here she was, like a young child aware that she was in danger, standing in front of the Hokage's desk. His tone was even as he asked, "Anko, do you know why I called you here?" "Yes, Lord Hokage," she said, lowering her head. "Good, then you already know of what happened." "Yes, well you should know what I have to do," said Sarutobi, nodding. She said, "No sir, I don't," shaking her head. "Well I have to assign you to protect him." "Why?" she asked, blinking. "Well Naruto was almost assassinated in our village and that showed how lax our security is. I'm reassigning you to follow him wherever he goes to protect him," said Sarutobi, staring at her as if she were a moron. Anko blinked and exhaled in relief. Although she had been worried that she was in danger, she had been sent on a mission to defend the man who had been attacked in the village the day before. The Hokage handed her a scroll with the words, "He should still be in the hospital, under heavy guard by his own people. I want you to take this to his room and talk to the people there. Convince them that you can protect him. This will be an A-rank mission. He must not be harmed anymore under our village's protection," and a picture of Naruto that had been taken while he was unconscious in the hospital. Anko read the mission objectives after taking the scroll. She had to persuade his partners to allow her to protect him while he was unconscious and to do the same when he woke up. She was not allowed to ask him questions or make any attempts to woo him. She thought blandly that it was the first time because she was unmarried and, style of clothing, she was occasionally tasked with luring a target to steal something or murder him when they were by themselves. Sarutobi always gave her the option to back out if she felt uncomfortable doing something, so it's not like she was compelled to do anything. The fact that she would have to keep him in view practically at all times was the only thing that bothered her. She didn't need to drag him in or watch him while he was on the toilet or in the shower. "When do I start?" she asked after a minute. "I'll do it," she said. "I hate you two assholes," Naruto said, glaring at the two people seated in his room. The man smirked as he loudly ate a bag of chips while Yayoi sipped some tea. "Sorry Ruto. Chan, doctor said you had to eat the stuff they bring you," Guro said, smirking as Yayoi suppressed a snicker. "Fuck what they say, give me a chip damn it," Naruto said with an increasingly intense glare. Naruto growled as Guro disregarded him and continued eating a chip. "Oh calm down Lord Chairman," Yayoi said gently, setting the teacup on the small table next to her. "They already sent you your lunch," she said, turning the table to reveal a large round cup full of unsweetened tea and a dark green plate covered by a large plastic top. After glaring at her, he turned to glare at Guro. Sighing, she said, "Guro out, wah." He blinked. She interrupted him with a glare that made the man wince. It was a glare that made a man fear being castrated. Bye. In an instant, he was gone. Yayoi pushed the table in front of the blonde and uncovered the plate. "Naruto-kun," she said in a slurry tone that she used to manipulate her husband. "Yayoi, yes?" With a sly smile, she took a seat on the mattress, with only the table standing between them. "Why are you being so hard on Naruto-kun?" As she did the same, he leaned in to say, "You know I hate hospitals. The only thing I hate worse is what they pass for food around here." He begged naively, "Please, for me," and she gave him a look that she hadn't given him in a long time. "If you do, I'll reward you," he said. Knowing what she meant, Naruto said, "Yayoi, what's wrong with you? You said it yourself. What happened was only a one-time thing," he asked, his eyes narrowing. "It's disrespectful to your husband." She interrupted him with an abrupt kiss, projecting her bottled-up feelings onto him as she leaned across the table and locked lips. Though he had ruined marriages and other relationships in the past, Dojima was a friend, and Naruto never betrayed friends unless they deserved it. Naruto was shocked because, although he had kissed so many times that it was second nature, Yayoi's husband had been a good man, a great husband, father, and a great friend, so to him, it felt like he was betraying the man's memory by sleeping with her. Yayoi laid on top of him, being cautious not to lean into the bandages and injure him, pushing the table aside and forgetting lunch. She gasped as she broke the kiss. I know how you feel and I felt the same way, but you don't know him like I do, she said. As the woman untied her obi, Naruto glanced at her. She was the relic of health, neither thin nor chubby, with fair skin that was neither too dark nor too light, a shade that matched her silky light brown hair in a traditional bun. He could see her tattoo, which was of a large orange koi fish surrounded by blue waves and pink flowers, wrapping around her shoulder and stopping just above her breasts. She had gotten the Yakuza tattoo after becoming the head of the Dojima family, and then had the clan crest inked in black on the fish's head and on her right shoulder. The obi came undone, and she slowly shrugged the kimono off her shoulders only to cover herself with a seductive smile. She slowly unveiled her chest as the kimono gathered around her hips, and he joined her in kissing him once more. You were Sohei. Kun's best friend Naruto-kun, Yayoi whispered. He saw you as the only person outside of the family he could trust, and if you hadn't taken lead of the clan he would have adopted you into our family. Her hands moved artistically over his chest, ghosting around the wound without revealing its location, while he massaged her entire back as they shared another kiss. As they gasped for air once more, she said wistfully, I think you would be happy to know that you were the one making me happy. Better you than some other fool who only wanted to take control of the family. As if they were two teenagers caught fucking by their parents, they were stopped by a knock on the door, and their heads snapped over in that direction. Yayoi and Naruto split up in a hurry and hastily got themselves together. Naruto pulled the sheets up as usual while Yayoi hurriedly put on the kimono and tied the obi around it. The door opened to reveal a purple-haired woman wearing a trench coat with a forehead protector that indicated she was a Konoha ninja, and a very revealing fishnet underneath. After glancing around the room, she said, Hello, my name is Anko Midarashi. The Hokage has sent me to protect you for the rest of your stay. Yayoi and Naruto exchanged glances. The woman began in a cold tone, I already told your Hokage. Your village already made a mistake once, and we won't make the same mistake again. Besides, why would we need you to try to protect me? Said Naruto, nodding and adding his own 2 yen. Anko became irritated and crossed her arms. Aside from the fact that you're in a hospital bed recovering from a near-fatal stab wound. Sarcastically, she said, I really don't know. Then she blinked, wishing she hadn't ruined the mission. I like you, Midarashi. The world needs more strong women like you who aren't afraid to speak their mind, Naruto said, laughing, or trying to, as his wound flared up and caused him to wince. Both of them gazed at him. As I anticipated, the Black Rose's head getting hurt in Leaf Village is bad press, but his passing is a different matter. I can't blame the elderly man for sending someone, though, because he always treated me like a grandchild. Naruto stopped and narrowed his eyes at her, saying, Fine, you can follow me around, but just to let you know, don't expect me to treat you like a friend. I don't know you and I sure as hell don't trust you. He also said, don't think for a minute that just because you're a ninja, you can order me to do something. You might have training, but so do I. Additionally, if you attempt to steal from me, let's just say that, in comparison to you, missing ninja would have an easier time surviving on the run. She wouldn't have been surprised if he had sprouted horns and a barbed tail, but she pushed it aside and nodded in understanding, making him instantly brighten like someone had flipped a switch. Anko felt the ice in his tone. Pure icy evil just eluded from him. Good, said the blonde with a broad smile. Now, since I'm a ninja, I must ask how much it would cost for you to sneak me something to eat that doesn't originate here. Yayoi and Anko both started to perspire. Or for you to assist me in getting away? The drop of sweat grew larger. I doubt you have enough. Dealing with the doctors here is a pain in the ass. Anko said, clearing her throat with a cough before entering and shutting the door. I'll pay you 85,000 yen. Anko stopped because her rent was due soon and a plate of dango cost about $250. Her rent was typically around $25,000 a month. She had to decide whether to do it and risk being viewed as a fool if word got out that she had declined, or to do it and risk being bitched at by the head doctor, get paid, have her rent paid, and still have money left over for a quick shopping trip later. The only reason he didn't ask her was because he knew she would say no, and Guro found it amusing to see him stranded there while Osamu and Futoshi would want him to stay in the hospital so the doctors could check on him. Yayoi shook her head with a little sigh. So of course Naruto would find a way to get out of the hospital early, preferring to have a mob doctor, one of the med school flunkies, bandage him and risk infection before staying there. Anko replied, okay deal, but if you don't pay up, I'm bringing you right back. Midarashi. Chan, the blonde grinned, I never break a promise, that is the Black Rose dogma. There were 7 main company dogmas, but there were also a few smaller ones. The company dogma was more than just a saying. It was the clan law, one you lived by and died by. and breaking it was an insult to the 8 heads of the clan as well as the chairman himself. Sankei. Za. Koru, which means, respect the elders, for their word is law, meant that everyone was expected to respect and obey the head of their family while also showing the same deference to the heads of other families, even if they were unable to treat you like one of their own. Reian, Goshujin, and Rui. Support your family, and they will support you. This also applied to everyone. You had to provide for your family in some way, whether it was through drug sales, protection, loan sharking, etc., but as long as you could provide for your family, they would help you however they could. Konrinzai. Ada. Korra. Never hurt children, because they are the future. The chairman's childhood was such that if he ever witnessed you abusing a child, you were doomed. You were not allowed to sell drugs to children, pimp children, or defraud them. If you ever saw a homeless child on the street, you were encouraged to help by giving them money or finding them a home, whether it be with a foster parent or in an orphanage. Mamori. Za. Kurin. Protect the clan because they are also your family. In the event that the clan was attacked, you were supposed to be prepared to drop everything at any time to defend them, even if it was your son's first birthday, your mother was dying, or your wife was giving birth. Never rat, because vermin are crushed, says Konrinzai, Nazumi. Otto. Shigiri. Fume, Otto. Shigri. Kipu. A promise made, a promise kept. The phrase, Otto. Shigiri. Fume, usually refers to making promises to other clansmen, but it has also been used to refer to defrauding a few people. The golden rule, according to Taizai, O. Za. Cage, was to stay in the shadows, because the light shall reveal all. Never expose the clan, which entails receiving a visit from a hit squad and usually results in being stabbed and slashed to death in public. One instance involved a person who disregarded this rule being cornered in a public park and killed in front of the park goers, exposing men, women, and children to the vicious attack. As she walked outside, watching Naruto being pushed in a wheelchair by her bodyguard and watching that Anko woman on the other side of the blonde, Yayoi thought about them. On their way to Naruto's hotel, where she and Anko would stay, she was still a little fired up from before and, although she was staying to help him, she didn't really trust the ninja. She couldn't help but groan as they walked because she knew that things would only get worse. 1245 Yuki no Kuni. A group of 5, the first 3 wearing white ninja uniforms with blue trim and each sporting a gray forehead protector that doubled as ear warmers, walked down the halls of Dodo Kazuhana's dark and ominous mansion toward a large set of double doors. The first was a man with light blue eyes, one with a scar about an inch down, and pale bluish purple hair, his face seemingly frozen in a frown. The second was a woman, the shortest of the 3 ninjas, with a smug expression on her face and a haughty gleam in her dull green eyes. Her protector wore a hat over her head, and she had 2 pink ponytails sticking out like antennas. Last but not least was a man who was taller than the others, had dark purple hair, squinted his eyes most of the time, and wore metal gauntlets and shoulder plates on each arm. 2 civilians, a man and a woman, were walking behind them. Both were dressed in suits, but the man chose to wear a long overcoat, and the woman wore a flowing fur coat that looked as warm as it was pricey. They were both carrying swords, the woman with a rapier like weapon with a straight blade and the man with a nodashi strapped across his back. The solemn man frowned and said, "You'd better watch your mouth when you talk to Lord Dodo," adding, "We will kill you." Behind them, the man sneered, "And you'll doom yourself too. We are representatives of something much bigger than you, boy, and killing us would only enrage our bosses," the woman said, nodding and resting her arm on the handle of her blade. "For such a flagrant display of hostility and disrespect, they will pour hell on this place." The 3 ninjas arrived at the door as her threat was coming to an end. "Lord Dodo, the envoy are here. Let them in." The 2 entered and bowed slightly to the man seated on a throne. "Yes, I have been anticipating your arrival. Tell me, what is so crucial that your clan sends 2 messengers to inform me?" A straightforward letter would have appeared. "Lord Dodo, I represent the Kurabara clan and have been authorized to offer you an opportunity that would prove fruitful for both parties." The woman stepped forward, indicating her authority over the 2. "We have received information on certain technologies that have piqued my employer's interest." "As in?" The woman hummed, "I won't mince words, sir. My employers want 24-hour access to your railroad lines because we constantly want to ship our goods across your borders. Additionally, we want to know how your shinobi's chakra armor dispels genjutsu, but we don't want to have our own. Finally, we would like to purchase some of those kunai firing weapons." The kunai launcher was equally important, though there were a few floating around out there, lost when Snow Ninja were killed. Dodo raised an eyebrow. Access to the trains was easy, but he didn't feel comfortable letting out of his country the chakra emitter that was used to disrupt genjutsu. What do I stand to gain? In addition to keeping you in good standing, we will give you a reasonable amount every month in exchange for unrestricted train access. Along with potential favors and being regarded as a clan ally, we will also pay in bulk for the weapons shipments. It didn't hurt to walk much, but switching between sitting and standing was a pain in the ass and gut for Naruto, who grunted as he lay down on the recliner and leaned back all the way while Anko rolled the wheelchair to the side where it collided with the wall and remained there. To Anko's delight, their first stop was a dango stand, where they ordered and consumed some before departing and making their way to the hotel. Anko collapsed on the couch as Yayoi vanished into the kitchen. She said, "Wow, nice joint," contrasting it with her own much smaller space. "It's all right, I guess," Naruto said, humming and shielding his face with his arms. Looking around a bit more, Anko noticed a polished wooden case that was about 4 feet long, 6 inches wide, and 3 inches thick. Examining it from a distance, she saw that it was a sword case, one of the more costly ones, and that it had a built-in lock in the center that had a 5-number combination that was almost impossible to pick because there was no backup keyhole to get around the combination. Yayoi entered carrying a teapot, which she held with a cloth because it was hot enough to burn her bare hand, and 3 cups in her other hand. After setting them all down on the coffee table and pouring them each a cup of tea, she moved closer to Naruto and sat across from Anko on the couch, offering him the first cup. The three sat in silence until the blonde sat up, wincing as he did, and Naruto drank it all, relishing the warm, sweet taste of the tea. "I'm going to bed," he said wearily, "but feel free to sleep in the other bedroom. I'll pay you tomorrow, Anko. Or, I don't care," on the couch. Yayoi turned to glare at the other woman as he slowly left the room so as not to worsen his injury. "You pay close attention, and the only reason you're here at the moment is because of the chairman's relationship with the Hokage. He has enough faith in the man to permit this. However, I will be keeping a close eye on you." "I'm not here to spy, if that is what you're insinuating," Anko said, looking offended. "You just watch yourself. Anything suspicious and I can have you removed," Yayoi interrupted, squinting her eyes. "I never said that," she said. Anko nodded, deciding that she had nothing to conceal. After what had transpired, she couldn't really hold the woman responsible for her hostility, and from her perspective, it was suspicious. When Anko woke up the following morning to the sounds of a fight and a struggle, she jumped off the couch because Yayoi had taken the guest bed. She swiftly followed the noises and opened the door to Naruto's room, only to discover Yayoi lying across the big bed, tied up in the white bed linens, while the blonde put on his suit coat without a shirt, exposing his chest. He said, "I'm not wearing a kimono, Yayoi," as he straightened his sleeves. The woman attempted to speak, but only heard muffled sounds because a portion of the sheet that was tied around her was used as a gag. He looked at the clock on the wall next to sliding glass doors that led to a small balcony and turned as the door struck the wall to see Anko. "Oh, hello, Ms. Midarashi, you sure slept in late," he said. The time had caught up with Anko, who grimaced as she looked at the clock. It was almost 11:30 now, and she tried to hide her embarrassment by asking, "What happened in here?" "Yayoi here felt that I should wear a kimono because it would be easy to rewrap my bandages later today," Naruto said, turning to face Anko with a naive smile after glancing to the side where she was now lying exhausted and huffing after struggling to break free but failing. "However, I persuaded her that wearing my suit is preferable to displaying weakness by letting my bandages be visible." He paused and put on his shoes, saying, "Besides, I heal quickly, this should be healed up good as new by tomorrow at the latest." Leaning against the doorframe, Anko gestured to the woman who was gagged and bound, asking, "What about her?" "Nope, I think it's one of those bloodline things. She heals normally like anyone else," he said, glancing at the woman. Sweat trickled down the purple-headed woman's face. "No. Are you really going to let her go?" The blonde said, "Oh. Of course I am." He approached and quickly pulled the knot, causing everything to loosen up, enabling Yayoi to remove the gag and get to his feet. "Fine, if you want to wear that, then wear it," she complained, crossing her arms. "I have to go and check on the—" She paused, carefully choosing her words as Anko stood by, and she glared at him, making him smirk. "Businesses?" Naruto replied, Yeah, I know, you and the others have to take care of my business while I'm down." "Good, now can I trust you not to get into trouble?" "I promise, Mother Hen," Naruto whimpered, rolling his eyes and raising one hand while keeping the other behind his back. "Okay then," Yayoi said with a single nod, then glared at Anko. "Can I trust you to keep him safe?" she asked. Anko nodded as the woman's glare made her feel as though the devil was standing over her. After giving them both a quick glance, she walked past them and out the door a few seconds later. "Come on in the living room, Anko. I had your money dropped off this morning, Naruto said, looking at the woman and holding up his other hand. Whoops, had my fingers crossed, he sang, causing Anko to snicker. As promised, 85k, Naruto said as he picked up a brown envelope and tossed it to her as they entered the living room. She caught it, peered inside, and grinned at the pile of bills. After hours of listening to the two ninja spew nonsense about youth, Nishki sobbed to himself and slammed his head against a crate. The cart's driver appeared to be in pain as well. He asked the two ninja who weren't irritated how they could put up with it. What? The girl, who had introduced herself as Tenten, asked loudly, looking perplexed. How do you stand them? What did you say? She asked as she pulled a pair of earplugs out of her ear and held up her hand for him to hold on to. As she walked slowly beside Naruto, who refused to sit in the wheelchair and be pushed around, Anko asked, "What are you talking about?" Imagine how surprised she was when he shared his personal opinions about the village when Anko asked him about it while they were strolling. He whispered to himself, but loud enough for her to hear, "Of course you'd disagree," adding, "Konoha has got to be one of the most dishonest, haughty, selfish, greedy, and careless villages I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot." She protested, "No it isn't," defending her village in spite of the way some people treated her because of her past. "Okay. Let me give you some examples," hummed Naruto. In the hidden village of Mist they are suffering through a civil war. A few years ago, a messenger from the rebels came nearly begging on her knees for help, but when the Hokage took it before the council they refused. One even suggested that they take the woman and breed her bloodline for the village. Sarutobi refused to let that happen of course, but the messenger left the village and returned to fight the war. I don't really need to say, but Konoha lost a possible ally in Mist, especially since they found a new ally and said messenger is now the new Mizukage. Wait, the bloodline war in Mist ended? Anko blinked. The brunette nodded. Has been for nearly a year and their new ally has helped them rebuild their village back to its former glory. It's not surprising that no one has heard, after all they've kept it quiet for some time. The only reason I know is because I heard that the Mizukage was planning on visiting for the festival later. I don't know why. Especially after Leaf refused to help. She wasn't particularly shocked to learn of the village's cruelty, especially since some people continued to call her derogatory names when they believed she was deaf. Hell, the only reason they hadn't permitted her to join a genin team and become an official Junin was because of the council. They didn't say it, but she understood why. They believed she would turn them into little traitors and still harbor sympathy for Orochimaru, that bastard snake. After a minute, she asked with genuine curiosity, "Who are their new allies?" He sighed, "Whoever they are, they're going to great lengths to stay hidden. Though I doubt that it's another ninja village, they would rather have their own clan of bloodline users. Want to hear another instance where your village shown its true colors?" He did not allow her to speak. Suna, a longtime ally of Konoha, is falling into recession. The reason? Konoha has been taking missions from people who normally send them to Suna. The Windlord has cut their funding numerous times and Konoha knows this, but instead of honoring the friendship and trust between each village, Konoha continues to ignore them, keeping all the missions instead of sending a few to them, as the terms of the alliance stated. Or how about I point of Konoha itself? Look at the front gates, it's a near utopia, full of life and prosperity, especially around the Hokage Tower. Civilian council members strut around like they own the world, looking down on others who aren't as wealthy as them, or thinking that they know what it's like to put your life on the line like a ninja. How they are able to command the village's ninja are beyond me. And while all this is going on, no one sees the slums, the place where I grew up in at the age of 4, a place where gangs steal from innocent people, where women are afraid to walk around because of rapists, homeless live in cardboard boxes next to dumpsters. All the while your council ignores them and spouts their bullshit about Konoha being the safest, most prosperous village in the elemental nations. She remained silent while he continued his tirade. They were in a less affluent area, and some of the neighbors began yelling their support. Some of the kids even started jumping up and down and cheering, but their mothers intervened. He undoubtedly possessed the gift of the silver tongue, as he was able to energize and encourage the onlookers with just his words. He looked at her with eyes that were as icy cold. Look around Ms. Midarashi, look at those that the village ignores. Look at the families, the mothers and fathers constantly on the grind to feed and clothe their children, some who still go to bed hungry. Can you look in their faces and tell me that what I'm saying is wrong? That they aren't constantly spat on by those who believe themselves to be better? From what I see, they are the true face of Konoha. The ones who are thankful for every little thing they get. Thank Kami for every day they wake up then work their ass off. The ones whose hands are tougher than the lives of those holier than thou, pompous fools. His voice became stronger and he extended his arms towards the other residents. So where do you lie, Ms. Midarashi? Does your loyalty stay with those who would rather see you a rotting corpse or a plaything to their whims, or does it go to the ones who really need a voice? To the ones that this village has silencing and ignored for too long. Personally, the rest of the village can burn in hell for all I care, but this place, this part of the village is a part of me just as it is to Konoha. I grew up alone and hated by most, but these are my people. Every woman you see is my sister, every man is my brother, every child is my niece and nephew, every orphan boy or girl is my son or my daughter. I left here as one of them, but I returned a rich and successful man. I will not rest until their lives improve. He removed the meat cleaver, and anyone who dares to try and stop me will suffer if they refuse to stop. They'll die. Anko began following Naruto around for a week, spending 7 full days witnessing him transform into a hero to the lower class villagers and be greeted with smiles from everyone he encountered on the street. Women would smile and occasionally wave, men would nod in respect and gratitude, and even the kids looked up to him as an inspiration and role model. They frequently had to halt their stroll when a group of children approached him to greet him or invite him to play. It was endearing to watch him smile and occasionally engage in a little game with the kids, Anko had to admit. He never acted cruelly or meanly toward them, nor did he swear or drink in front of them. Given that he was the ideal father figure, she would have to acknowledge, if she were being completely honest with herself, that she might be falling for him. She had seen him speak to a man in a suit in the middle of the slums shortly after his speech, and he had later informed her that the man was one of his employees. It was a brief exchange in which Naruto was telling the man something, so she didn't hear much. He told her it was charity work when she asked. Then, at about 4 o'clock, not 3 hours later, he brought her back to the slums to witness the charity's outcome. Both men and women were distributing toys and clothes to everyone while displaying the black rose symbol. His words, "Look, Ms. Midarashi, look at the expressions of joy on the faces of the children, the happiness of the adults," were still fresh in her mind. Their children receive clothing and toys, but they also receive these things. Even if it was just clothes, receiving something nice like this would have made me the happiest child alive. The joyous expression on a young girl's face was etched in her memory, and the giggles she let out while cuddling a stuffed animal made her heart skip a beat. Was this something she had truly missed? To have spent so much time in the village and only now become aware of it? All of these people deserve to wear new clothes, and they deserve these gifts. She thought, everyone deserves to look nice or pretty every now and then. She saw a tearful mother holding a pretty pink dress and hugging her husband before hugging the woman who gave it to her. Families would return home over the course of the following few days to discover additional presents in their mailboxes or outside their doors. With her ninja training, she had assisted in delivering some of these. Each was stocked with essentials such as fresh toothpaste and toothbrushes, combs and brushes, soap, fever, cold, and headache medications, and first aid kits. Even though he was expelled by the hateful matrons at the orphanage, he still sent some toys and clothing to the kids there. Indeed, he was a contemporary Robin Hood, but he didn't steal from the wealthy. You never tasted a steak as good as they could cook, though some would argue that he did because his restaurants were so costly. The blonde shouted, "Come on guys, let's get these birds loaded up," as he saw a group of men move boxes that appeared heavy before piling them into a big cart. As the men loaded the boxes out of the building's freezer door, Anko watched from the roof of Naruto's place, the upscale eatery Atlantis. She was exhausted because they had been here since 5:30 in the morning and it was already 7. She glanced down at the blonde and saw his helper, a young man named Nishki, count the boxes as they went by and record the total on a clipboard. It was entertaining to watch since Naruto would make jokes about him for amusement. Flashback. How could you send me there? Those things nearly drove me insane, screaming about youth and spring. Anko winced. She felt sorry for him and knew exactly who he was referring to. Oh, get over it, Naruto shrugged as he read the article about his small charity event the previous day. Keep on complaining and you're going back with them, he said. Is my mental health nothing but a game to you? He asked in horror as Nishki gaped at him. Rack him up, let's play again, Naruto said, glancing at him across the paper. End of flashback. Since she had laughed at one of Naruto's jokes, they had formed an odd bond. He didn't like her at all, but he tolerated her because Naruto seemed to like her. After completing the count, Nishki nodded to Naruto, who gestured for the men to move on. 3 burly-looking men in tight black shirts grabbed the front handles of the freezer and began pushing the carts with ease, locking the door behind them, putting them in front of 2 more carts. Nishki turned to Naruto and said, "Ah sir, I have a request to make. I need a place to stay. Seems that the floor my room was on is being fumigated again." Anko then leapt down and joined Naruto and Nishki on the road. "Yes, I heard. They keep trying but you always come back," Naruto hummed. Naruto's serious appearance caused Nishki to perspire and Anko to choke with laughter. "Lord Chairman, I'm serious," the man declared. "Me too. But you're out of luck because Anko has moved into my guest room, Naruto said, glancing at him. Sarutobi yawned while completing his paperwork and swore at anything that might have added to his workload. Sensei. A white-haired man said as his window was suddenly flung open. He hurled a coffee cup in the direction of the sound while still half awake, only to break the glass when the window was swiftly closed. He sighed as his student climbed through, ignoring the shards. Damn it, Jiraiya-kun. That's the third time this month, he said. He laughed. Sorry, Sensei. I just came by to see how you're doing, and to ask if you know where Naruto is. He's not at his hotel or the hospital. The Hokage replied, yes, he woke up a day after the attack. He was already walking around last time I saw him. Last I heard he was working on some large project in the village. I haven't heard much about it, but I have the report somewhere from his guard that I assigned to follow him. You have someone spying on him? Jiraiya asked, blinking. He knows, said Sarutobi in an offended tone, and he could have sent her away if he hadn't wanted to. So you haven't read it yet? The Hokage glanced at him and then at the pile of papers he needed to finish. Oh. Right, feel free to read it if you want, he said, shaking his head. He discovered it while looking through some scrolls and tossed it to the man. Wow, kid's quickly becoming a hero. Jiraiya whistled after opening the report scroll while seated on the couch off to the side. Care to share what you're reading? Sarutobi asked, raising his head again. Naruto's been busy. He's started going charity drives for the less fortunate in the slums where he grew up. The homosexual commented while reading. He's basically the civilian version of his father in terms of people looking up to him. Says that the kids love him and want to be like him. Stopping his paperwork, Sarutobi opened his bottom drawer, took out his crystal ball, and turned it on. He said, let's see what our Minato is doing, wondering what the blonde was up to. After a brief period of cloud cover, the ball cleared up to reveal Naruto standing on the tailgate of a big merchant cart with a group of people wearing black shirts. Although they were unable to hear him, they could see the crowd in front of him applauding. They moved into a single file line after a moment, and he began distributing frozen turkeys to the crowd by opening the boxes. Amazing, Jiraiya replied, that's got to be enough turkey to feed every family in the slums. In order to distribute the free dinners to those who otherwise couldn't afford them, the individuals in black shirts climbed into the back of the other two carts and began doing the same. The younger of the two said, you know, he could easily start a riot if the council keeps trying to screw him over. Taking out his pipe and packing it, Sarutobi nodded wisely and said, yes. And if he's anything like his parents, he'd carry out such a threat if he had to. You of all people should know that. The uncontrollable pervert that he was, Jiraiya pushed his luck and suffered as a result of a brief flashback to when Kushina threatened to kick him in the balls if she caught him spying on her. Why are you looking for him anyway? Replied the Hokage, it's far too early for him to be doing any training with you. Not too long before he was attacked, I met with him about getting the information you asked me to find. I had just learned that he had his own information network that made mine look like the Academy Gossip Circle, the pervert said, rolling up the scroll and setting it on the man's desk. I wouldn't be surprised. Naruto always had a way of finding out little secrets that no one wanted out in the open, the elderly Hokage laughed. And with all the money he makes, it can't be hard. You on the other hand supported by yourself, so it's harder for you. As his sensei concluded, he muttered, wow, what a confidence boost. So you knew? He asked. Nope. It was just a little strange when he showed up out of the blue and pointed out 2 areas of the village that were up for sale. I just figured he had an information network of his own. After all, you usually need to go through a lot of paperwork to find out what's for sale, and anyone who does it is screened and recorded. He's not called the professor for nothing, Jiraiya sighed. Naruto waded through the throng of grateful people, shaking a few hands and courteously speaking a few words to some as the final family received a complimentary turkey. Nishki went with the carts, and Anko followed him from the roof. He soon emerged from the crowd and took off his white coat, laughing as some kids nearby wore similar inexpensive sunglasses. He began, you know Anko, as she leapt from the roof and landed beside him. If being a ninja here don't work out, you're always welcome to come work for me. With a startled tone, Anko questioned, really? What brought this up? I just thought that we'd make good partners. Naruto shrugged and gestured to the side. Anko noticed some kids playing. Some of the boys had spiked hair like Naruto, and the girls had ponytails with spikes like hers. It wasn't a thankless job helping Naruto. She did it because of the kindness that had been shown to her, but it wasn't as if she was using genjutsu. Eventually, she would be able to get away with it. The boys naturally imitated Naruto, and the girls did the same to her. She grimaced after giving it some thought. The idea of young girls dressing, or not, like her, annoying their parents, and then forcing them to follow her. She gathered her trench coat a bit more and glanced around, praying that no kids were already engaging in this behavior. "Come on, Anko, let's go get some dango," Naruto said with a laugh. "We have to do something about that monster. That little demon is just biding his time." Danzo frowned as he listened to the civilians argue back and forth. None of these idiots realized how foolish their plans were. They intended to murder the Uzumaki and take his companies, but they hadn't considered the issues that would arise. Killing the Uzumaki would only make things worse because the Black Rose was a multinational corporation, not a small shop. After a minute, Danzo said, "Killing off the boy is a big mistake," drawing attention from the civilian council as he got to his feet. "You can do as you wish, but you're not using my men to do it," he said. "I will not be a part of this, and as much as I hate to say it, Sarutobi was right when he ordered to leave the boy alone," he said as he slowly made his way to the door. He kept his intention to try to form an alliance with the boy a secret from them. Uzumaki Naruto was a human, not a demon, and he knew this better than they did. He persisted in wanting the boy to be trained to defend the village when Naruto was still a newborn, not because he believed the boy was a demon but rather because he could control it. Konoha would once again be the strongest village if a ninja had the ability to control the strongest demon. Unfortunately for him, however, Sarutobi still had the authority to prevent that at each council session. He intended to approach the boy to train him even after he was too old to be accepted as a full member of Root. Seeing the boy's dedication to the village, he wasn't a fool and dared to say that his own ninjas were traitors in comparison to the blonde. After the entire Forbidden Scroll incident, Mizuki deceived Naruto into taking the scroll and showed him the fox. Then everything collapsed. Before he could make the offer, Naruto left the village because he no longer loved it, and he remained hidden for years. Danzo could visit and try to make a deal with the blonde now that he was back. Even though he was no longer a ninja, he still had the political clout and the resources to get things done. After all, he was aware that Naruto's support could significantly change the course of any situation, whether it be a national incident or a war, etc. Now all he had to do was figure out how to persuade him and what he could use to get his consent. The blonde could not purchase it, it would have to be something that he alone could provide. He had read the few reports his root ninjas had given him, and women were out of the question. He had the ability to sweet-talk them out of their underwear and pick them up like fruit. For obvious reasons, money was out. Blackmail was strictly prohibited. Providing training for ninjas? Is it possible? He had heard that Jiraiya was gradually training him, and that the man would appear at seemingly random times. Training would only get him so far, and Naruto didn't seem like the kind of person who would be obsessive about learning jutsu, so he would need more. After the secret meeting was initiated by the civilians in the council chambers, Danzo departed to return to his own underground base. After an hour, the ninja he had concealed in the meeting room suddenly appeared. "Lord Danzo, I've come to give you the civilians' plans." The man with one eye gestured for him to go on with his single arm. "They've come up with a plan to frame him. Hey Anko. Chan. Over here." When the two turned to face the source of the voice, they noticed a booth across the room occupied by women, all of whom had on headbands bearing the Konoha symbol. One he identified as Hinata's teacher, Kurenai. "Girls' night?" he asked in a low voice. She gave a nod. As he noticed Guro sitting in a corner, he hummed, "Go on and be with your friends. You need a break. If you need me I'll be over there." Guro had been following him around for the past week. Without arguing, they parted ways, with Anko heading to the right and Naruto heading to the booth on the left side of the building. With Naruto, Guro spat out a piece of dango after Naruto walked up to the table and gave him a pop in the back of the head. "Hey. Who the? Onaru. Chan," the blonde said, "you know when I'm trying to find you you're never around," as he straightened his shirt. Naruto disregarded the name and moved past him to sit across from him. "But when I'm not it's like looking for Orochimaru at a Boy Scouts meeting. He's always lurking in a corner." While Naruto ordered a plate and some tea, Guro muttered something. As the waiter left, he said, "What no sake for you?" After nodding, Naruto said, "I have to set a good example for children." Guro whimpered, "Come on, I'm much older than you." The brunette looked at him. "From the way you act one find it hard to believe but I'm not joking. Take a walk through the slums and you'll see my child army. Orochimaru would kill to be you," Guro said with a smile before bending forward and adding, "Speaking of which, who's the babe you walked in with?" "That Guro is Anko Mitarashi, a special Junin of Konoha and an expert in torture and interrogation," Naruto said as he took a sip of his tea after receiving his order. "What's she doing with you?" "She's my bodyguard," courtesy of the old man himself, "but the bigger question is where is my information?" Naruto said as he bit into one of the dango. "Lord Chairman, I know it's not my place to say, but I don't trust this village at all. Guro said quietly as he passed the scroll across the table after scowling and taking it out of his pocket. Guro, I understand and agree fully. Precautions have been made just in case of anything, and besides I doubt that anything will happen so close to the festival, Naruto said, taking it and slipping it into his inner coat pocket. I hope not. With Anko, Kurenai and the other girls would gather once a week to discuss their lives, and Anko would sit next to them. When Kurenai spoke about the dearth of decent men, they were generally in agreement. She would eat dango while listening. Sume would occasionally joke about someone, usually her runt of a son, in a crude but humorous way. Hana would share stories about her workdays. Yoshino Nara would gripe about the sloth of her clan. And every other girl who usually accompanied them was away on a mission. Yoshino said, I haven't seen you lately, Anko, as she sipped her sake. Yeah, usually you're up and hurting some pervert by lunchtime. I've been getting up late for the past week, Sume said, nodding as he chewed on one of the sticks. Well, I've been busy. Some people have very important missions that need to be done, Anko said after stealing one of Karina's dangos. Like what? Her gaze shifted to Hana, who tilted her head to the side. Well, I've been playing bodyguard to a rich businessman, she said. Yeah, right, after the last time where that guy tried to bribe you to let him play with you. Anko nodded. No, this guy's different. He's one of the most successful men in the nation and he's not even in his 20s. I'm telling you, if he asked me to, I would quit my job and work as his bodyguard forever. Besides what I make from the village, he pays me extra to do little things. Like prank random people just for a good laugh. Kurenai asked, drawing attention from the girls. You mean Naruto? He hired us to escort a few carts back to the village. He's a real nice guy. You know, they saw money changes people, but from what I heard about him years ago, back when he was in the academy, he hasn't changed a bit. Anko laughed. Oh yes, he has. Remember that time his was being chased by those Anbu and lost his shirt? Well, if he took his shirt off now, you'd need a transfusion.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.